Bring us back from recess from the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Today is Wednesday, February 26th. It is a great day for some work session things that we're going to do today. Our strategic plan is on our agenda item 13 for county administration. Our consultants from Moss Adams are here with us. Annie Rose, I'm going to hand it to you and you can introduce your staff and we can get rolling on this important event. So thank you for coming and thank you for all those around the table who came as well. We look forward to this meeting.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for gathering here, for squishing in around this table. We're going to be doing a lot of pair work, small group work. We're going to be getting you up and about today as well. So we really appreciate your time and your presence here. Before we begin, we do want to do a quick round of introductions. So I'm Annie Rose. I'm joined by my colleague Jesse. We'll be introducing more of our team members. But before we do that, I actually want to hand it over to Jeff to also introduce some of the important Lane County staff members who are supporting this.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Kincaid. I'm a senior operational analyst in county admin. I'm leading the very awesome team of Judy, Latife, Laura, and Tina, who are they're hiding around the periphery, but are very involved in the day-to-day. And I just want to take an opportunity for transparency as well. For the broadcast at 11:45, we will lose the Channel 21 Metro broadcast. The webcast will continue, and it will, of course, still be recorded. But just so the public and everyone watching knows, that feed will cut at 11:45, but will continue to be broadcast and saved. So thank you, and I don't know if Steve has any comments before Moss Adams kicks off, but it's good to be here, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Well then, as I said, my name is Annie Rose Faber. I'm a director at the Moss Adams team, and I lead our firm's strategic planning efforts with public sector organizations. So I spend most of my time with cities and counties and public agencies doing just this type of planning work. And we have a whole team of folks behind us as well who are helping assist with this. We have Colleen Rosillas, who leads our firm's practice for all of our public sector consulting. We have Maria Stroth, who's providing an equity lens as we move through this work, and James Warren, who's our analyst as well. And then over to you, Jesse.
Thank you so much. Jesse Lenhart. I am a senior manager with Moss Adams, working right alongside Annie Rose for all of the strategic planning for all of the public entities that we serve. So we're the dynamic duo that gets to have a lot of fun with all of the entities that we serve, doing work exactly like this. So pleasure to join you all today.
All right, so we know that you all know each other already, but we are going to take 30 seconds, turn to the person next to you, say a good morning, let them know your favorite
Restaurant.
What is it?
So this is a little bit, okay, so it's a little self-serving. I did spend probably 7 years. I went to U of O, I lived in Springfield, I worked at Jerry's, also the Macy's over at Valley River Center. The nostalgia hit me like a ton of bricks as soon as I landed. It was wonderful. So it's been probably 15 years since I've been back. So it's a little self-serving. Turn to your neighbor, introduce yourselves if you haven't met yet, and then talk to each other about your favorite restaurant. We're gonna see where their commonalities are. And then when we come back, we will go. So, on your mark, get set.
Mine's a vibe. They're in town, but I think my favorite restaurants are in Austin. Amazing. Yeah, we did. You did go to Cherry Black. We went to Right Cross, which was amazing. Very special class, and we went and joined her afterwards. Right then, we got into the building, and oh my gosh.
I would recommend going to
Thanksgiving, because that's when they do their seafood ravioli. One of the best meals you will ever have.
But, you know,
I think it was really that maybe the angles that were seen my wife.
I'm sure we can continue this conversation for the rest of the morning. But does anyone want to advocate, throw a name out here, make a recommendation? Any most popular restaurants?
Share the restaurant.
Tavern on
Well,
the
we
Main.
have the same one.
Yes. Okay.
Waterfront Depot.
Waterfront Depot,
Did you
okay.
know this already? I did not. Okay, see?
That's great. Anyone else? Anyone else want to add to this?
Tavern on Main, downtown Springfield.
There you go. I love when all of the lights went up on downtown Springfield. All right, any others? I know I heard some. Back, in the back?
Oh no, I was waving. Sorry.
Okay.
Excited to see
Sit
people.
on his hands.
All right, well, in the break, please come and let us know if there's others that we need to add to our list here. Excellent. All right, well, thank you for doing that. Today, we want to share what we're actually going to be going through because we do have quite a lot of ground to cover. We want to share an overview of the strategic planning process so that make sure everyone is on the same page about where we are going with this work. We also want to gather your input. You will see we have up around the walls, we have vision, mission, values, core behaviors, all that good stuff. And we're going to be getting a lot of input from you all on these items. Now today, what we are not doing is we are not making final decisions and we are not wordsmithing statements. So I promise we will not put you all in this room and make you work through an entire sentence together. That is pretty terrible. Let's not do that. But what we do want to do is hear from you. We want to get your input. And what we're going to be doing after this session is taking the input that you share today, going back, making some updates, making some drafts, and then bringing them back to you. So this is just one point in this process. This is going to be pretty iterative. So again, today is really about getting broad input, brainstorming, feedback, response from you all. The other thing that we are going to be doing is we're going to be looking at your SWOT analysis. So we have put together an initial SWOT analysis, and that's your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we like to begin some of the planning process with looking at this because it's basically a snapshot of where are you as an organization, where is your community right now, what are the things that we're going to want to rely on in terms of strengths to leverage those in the strategic plan versus what are the challenges that we see ahead that we need to mitigate and manage as part of the planning work. So we're going to spend a little bit of time there, and then that's going to help inform our conversation around the strategic goals. So that's where we are headed. Within that, we have you until, we're going to close out around 11:55 today as the goal so that we can get you out of here or onto your next item at 12. We'll have some breaks in here as well, so we anticipate, we'll kind of read the room, see where we are at in terms of breaks and when we will need some of those. But within that, we did want to set some initial sort of ground rules for this conversation because this is a little bit different. This is a little bit different of a work session than you probably usually have. We are having a joint work session today. We're bringing folks together where obviously you all know each other, you work together, but we are also asking you all to come to this in a really kind of open, constructive, creative mindset as we're going into this work. So we are going to ask you to actively participate and have awareness. And so what I mean by that is we want to hear from as many of you as we can. And if you've been really actively participating, that's a moment to also take a step back and say, okay, I want to make sure that I'm sharing this space and making sure that everybody gets heard here as well. So we're going to be doing some of that as we go through. I am going to ask for respectful use of tech is what I say. I know that you probably have your phones, you have your laptops, you have other pieces that are going to be pulling your brain out of this meeting, and I totally understand that. You're all very, very busy. What I will ask is that when you can, try and be as present in this room as possible and give your energy to each other as well. So obviously that doesn't mean put everything away. We know that you may need to step out for a call, other things like that, but for when you can, try and be present here. Taking care of ourselves, if you need to go and use the restroom, to go take a call, to do other things, please just do that. We're going to be kind of moving the discussion along fairly quickly today, but we also want to make sure that you all take care of yourselves. Being okay with not resolving everything. Like I said before, we're not making final decisions today. We're going to be hearing from everyone, and so part of that might be that we hear two completely different opposing views on something. That is totally fine, and we don't need to resolve that in today's session. We just want to hear sort of what is the groundwork, what's out there. So I encourage you to take that attitude here as well. Obviously, being respectful, giving each other grace for this conversation, knowing that the first thing out of somebody's mouth might be their first draft rather than their last and final draft, so that we can all hear each other for what we're trying to say. Being curious is part of that. Reserving judgment, this is a piece that we hope that you'll bring in. And with this very large group, I am going to ask for what we can, try not to speak over each other during this meeting. So if we need to, we'll resort to raising hands. Sometimes the conversation will just flow, but we are, as facilitators, if we run into that instance, we might ask you to pause or hold so that we can make sure, again, that we're hearing from everyone. Any questions on these meeting norms or anything that anyone wants to add to these norms for today's session? Okay. I'm seeing some thumbs up, feeling good. Okay, so this is what we're going for here. I should say too, we will be providing a copy of this full PowerPoint to you all as well after this session, so in case you want this for reference. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jesse to do a really quick overview of our strategic planning process.
Okie doke. So today, what we are gathered here together to do today is to walk you through kind of the next iteration of your 3-year strategic plan. So this is a super normal part of kind of going through the process of refreshing your plan. 3 years is great. It keeps things moving, it keeps things going, really makes sure that your priorities are focused and makes sure that any planning initiatives are kind of up to date. 3 years can feel like a long time if you are 3, but for county professionals, it can go by really quickly. So the goal here today, we're going to kind of refresh, take a look at your current goals, get that updated understanding, and then kind of carry it forward into the next iteration of the plan, right? And the goal of a strategic plan is to provide a roadmap, really kind of set that framework for tackling things and initiatives that you know about, but also putting the framework together to handle things that are yet unknown. Anything that might come up in the future, you have this framework, you have lenses, you have your mission, you have your goals to assess any new things that might come up over the next 3 years. I would say if looking back over the last 3 years taught us anything, it's that we want to make sure that we are able to be responsive, we're able to be agile, but we're also able to take advantage of things that fall within our strategic plan. And so we'll talk about that coming up. So in the strategic planning process, the way we put the document together, I'm sure it's not a surprise to a lot of folks, is going to be really similar to what you've seen already. We structure it in terms of a pyramid, but really the mission, vision, values, and your strategic lenses and core behaviors are the foundation of what you do. So everything should flow from that. So vision, mission, values, those are things that are going to really set and ground your strategic plan. Then we're going to get into goals, and then what we like to do in the planning process is break it down. Really take that vision, that ideal, that vision of the future and make it tangible. So we do that by building out goals. Within those goals, we have objectives. And then for each one of those goals, we also have performance measures, because a really good plan is one that you can use as a communication tool to say, this is all the work that we've been doing, and these are the ways in which we've made progress. These are the ways in which we have achieved our goals, and these are the ways in which we maybe have fallen short, and here's a little bit more about why. So really kind of putting all of those pieces together can make the plan one that is less likely to sit on a shelf. So through this process and what we like to do in our strategic planning process, it's never an out-of-the-box solution. So what we do is we engage a lot of different folks in the planning process. As a county, we want to make sure we're bringing together a lot of perspectives. So from the board, management and staff and community stakeholders, we've done a lot of work, and kind of the culmination of that outreach is what you're seeing around you today. So we're looking at the results of the SWOT analysis, our interviews, our community outreach, our focus groups that we did, the public survey that we did. So have done a lot of work over this last little bit of time to hear a lot. This is the summary of what we heard, and this is the point where we engage you to say, is there anything else? Is there anything we have questions about? Is there anything that's missing? Is there anything that surprised you? So we go through that process as we're putting the plan together, again, to make sure that anything that you do is really reasonable and in tune with the community. So what does this look like in steps? So we are here at our first joint work session, and you can see all of this work ahead of us with all of our outreach and engagement initiatives. So we had a couple of kickoff meetings. Because I am a project management professional and proper planning does prevent poor performance, we have kickoff meetings with management and the board, with the community employee surveys, get a lot of really broad feedback. We held interviews with board members, senior management, then we did community focus groups, then we kind of provided that feedback for a preliminary review with management, and now we are gathered here today to bring kind of the results of all of that together. Next up is where we then start to build out and refine each one of those elements. We don't go away and do that on our own. We'll provide drafts. We'll get those in front of you. You'll have a chance again to provide feedback in that next joint work session, and then we'll go through the steps to kind of continue to iterate on the plan, review the plan, and then kind of at the end, put it forward for adoption. All right, so this is one. Again, Inros, am I talking about this? I think yes, okay. So this is one, when we have joint work sessions like these, can be really helpful to think about, okay, how am I showing up in the room in order to provide feedback? What is my role? How am I making decisions? Especially when you have a really broad mix. So we heard not only are there going to be kind of management team members here, it could be other staff present, we've got the planning team here, we have board members here. So this can be helpful to understand, okay, what lens am I looking at, digesting, and providing feedback on this information for? Because sometimes we wear a lot of hats. So typically, and this is also one that we like to review with about every public entity that we work with. So the board, typically in this situation, the role of the board is to guide and direct, right? So we decide what, request information, consider issues, creates, reviews, adopts policy. Really, right at the very end, the board is going to be responsible for adopting and approving the plan, right? So at the end, we're going to kind of come to the board for that final okay. You're going to oversee the county administrator, county council, and approves and reviews the budget, right? So all of this, any work that the plan needs to carry out, it's going to require funds, it's going to need to go in front of the board. So lots of engagement there. Then typically, right, the executive and county team really decides on how. So where the board provides that guidance and that direction, when you're looking at this information, really asking yourself, does this give me enough information in order to understand and ask those questions to guide and think about the county's next 3 years? Then for the management team, when you're deciding how, seeking and providing information, providing recommendations, implementing the plans, actually getting into doing the work, really reviewing the information to say, do I have enough of an understanding? Is this sufficient to guide how I do this? Who I need to engage? How much is this going to cost? What's the impact going to be on the community? And all of those pieces. So thinking through those lenses can really help make sure that both sides of the plan are covered. That it's not one that is just idealistic, but one that also bridges the ideal with the action. It makes it achievable. Again, makes it one that isn't going to sit on the shelf.
So Jesse really took me at my word when I said, let's do a quick overview here.
Yeah.
I love it. So I do want to pause. Any questions on what we've covered so far? Because I know that this concept of the board being there to direct and guide, the management team being there to administer and provide that operations, the deciding what versus the deciding how, that's going to be a really important concept for the strategic plan, because it's also about how people are going to be engaged in this work in terms of, we want the board setting the big picture direction, the goals, all of those things, and then when we get into those tactics, that's really when we're going to be relying on the management team as well to be providing that input. So I just wanted to pause here. Anything that we want to talk about on this concept? Okay, feeling pretty good? Okay, we will probably come back to this as we go, because this one might be an idea that comes up later on in this work, especially when we get into some of those final decision-making items as well. So thank you for letting us take a pause here. Back to you, Jesse.
Oh yeah. Okay, so then heard a little bit about roles and responsibilities for the different parties here today. So our role and responsibility through the strategic planning facilitation process, and then roles and responsibilities for approving and carrying out the plan. So this again is a very high level overview of kind of how people are being engaged and expected to show up through the strategic planning process. So right at the top, Moss Adams Steering Committee, you all today, we're the drivers, right? And so we are, as you saw, we're building out the plan. We're going through the steps to engage people. We're taking that iterative approach in order to work through drafts, get your feedback, and work with you all to develop a plan that's responsive, in tune with the community, one that can be carried out, one that's really focused, one that works to really kind of prioritize major initiatives, because again, 3 years is quick. So then the board. You all, right, will be the final approvers of the plan. You are one of the ones at the end when we come forward and say, here's the plan that we worked on, you will say yay or nay. You are consulted and, as evidenced by your presence here today, contributors to the plan. You are part of interviews, we have your feedback, you'll be part of kind of drafting and going through each of those strategic planning elements, you'll be part of it kind of throughout. And you will stay informed throughout the process, right? Status updates, not only for the strategic planning process, but then as also initiatives are carried out and you start to work through the plan. Management and employees also consulted, contributors also informed, the same with community members. Questions? Surprises? Okay, great. All right, foundational statements, and Amy Rose is gonna cruise through this one.
Fantastic, and I realized that now would be a great time to put the survey pieces up.
Yeah, you got it.
So yes, that would be fantastic. Okay, so we want to talk through the foundational statements, and by that I mean your vision statement, your mission statement, value statement, some of these pieces that we have up here on the left-hand side of the room. And before we get your feedback on this, we wanted to share some of the feedback that we've already received on these statements. So up to this point in time, we've gone through, as Jesse mentioned, a couple different areas of input. So we got interviews, we interviewed, I think, basically everybody in this room. We wanted to have one-on-one so that we could understand what your priorities were, where you're coming from, what's going to be most important to you throughout this plan. We also conducted focus groups with community representatives. So we met with about 20 representatives from different community organizations and partners who are providing various perspectives on what they are hoping to see in this plan. And then we did some large-scale surveys. So we did a broad employee survey. We had over 600 responses to that survey, which was absolutely fantastic to see how employees showed up and provided comment and really engaged in this work. We also did a community survey, and I'll be talking a little bit more on both of these so you can see kind of who took these surveys, what this looked like. And I will say today we're going to be sharing some of the results from the focus groups and from the surveys themselves, but we're not sharing all of the results during this session just in order for time. But within that, you will get copies of that after this session as well. So you'll be able to dig into those more, and we'll also be using them to inform our second work session that's going to be coming up in March too. So this is not the only time you're going to be seeing some of this information, and we have more of it to share. Within that though, just to give you a sense of the survey participants, this is from the employee survey results. So we had over 50% of the folks who took the survey have been with the county between 1 and 5 years, excuse me. So we have a relatively newer set of folks. About 30% self-identified as being part of the marginalized community, and the majority of folks were not from a management perspective. We also have across the top, the number of folks from each department, and you will see, unsurprisingly, a very large group from Health and Human Services and a very large group from Public Works. Given how the county's staffing levels are, that totally tracks. But something to think about. This is not a statistically representative survey of your employees. These are the folks who chose to show up and to share input. But it's still really fantastic input, and we're going to be sharing quite a bit of it today. The other piece that I want to go through, and I promise I will stop talking very soon and turn it over to you, but the other piece I wanted to go through is the community survey results. As I said, we had a good showing of folks. I will say, for the most part, we asked folks to identify what city they most closely identify with, and most folks were from the Eugene Springfield area, which I don't think is very surprising. One thing though that this flagged for our team is that this was just the initial community input that we were gathering. When we get later on in this process and we actually have a full draft of the plan, we're going to be going back to the community. And I would say that's one of the most critical times when we really need very, very broad community input. For this survey, a lot of it was kind of big picture ideas. Tell us about your vision for the future of the community. Once we get that draft together, that's when we're going to be going back and really digging in and making sure that we have really broad geographic representation. So I do want to say, at least at this point in time, this is just the initial step in this work, and we will be doing quite a bit more as we get through later in the process as well. But it was really great to see we have a bunch of people who responded who live in Lane County or work in Lane County or own a business in Lane County. We had about 50% who identified as being part of a marginalized community. And we had over 50% of people who took the survey have been here for more than 20 years. So that's exciting to see too, that there's quite a balance there in terms of the perspectives based on how long folks have been here. So that's the background that we want to give you before you actually see some of these results as well. And like I said, for the employee survey, this community survey is not statistically representative. This is who chose to take part in this. So we can't say that, you know, anything that comes through the survey is a mandate from the community, but it is a really great insight into the perspectives of those who chose to take this particular survey. So with that, now, we are going to start our first piece of work together today, which is looking at these foundational statements. So we have the vision statement, the mission statement, the value statement, core behaviors, and strategic lenses. These were all items that were created as part of your last strategic planning process. For this work, often what happens is when we get to this point, we're not expecting to completely rewrite these, we're not trying to completely reinvent the wheel, but we do want to take a moment to say, since the last time you did planning work, is there anything that we need to adjust or update? Are there tweaks we need to make? Are there adjustments? Or are these all feeling pretty good to us in terms of where these statements are right now? So what I'm going to have you do is we have up on this side, you can ignore everything that's on the windows, but on this side of the room, we have these statements up around the room. We also, next to these, have some of the staff and community survey responses so that you'll be able to see those as we go through as well. And we're going to ask you to get into a pair. Or ask you to pair up with someone who you don't usually work with. So we are hoping to get some circulation going. We're going to do this a couple different times, so this is not your only pair that you will work in. And then you have some sticky dots in front of you. So we're going to ask you to go around and, as a pair, look at each of these statements and put a rating on the statements. You can look at the survey responses, see what comes back through there. But we want to say, see, the red sticky dots are, this statement needs to be entirely reworked. Yellow means, I like this statement in general, but I could see some adjustments, some updates, maybe changing some language. Green would be, this statement as it is, I'm feeling good about this. If you have ideas for edits, if you put a yellow sticky dot on there, please also take your sticky notepad and write something to help us understand what you would like to see different about that statement. So you can add edits to the sticky notepads and then just slap them right up onto the pieces of paper. So before I release you, any questions about this as an activity?
So we're pairing up, so are we dots per pair or dots per person?
Dots per pair, please. Yes.
I got overambitious.
Yeah, there's a lot of dots out here.
Just in case you would like your own dots, you have them. But one kind of dot representing the pair.
Yeah. All right, so then with that, I'm gonna let you find some pairs. We're gonna take 10-15 minutes here to go around. Have at it.
Ellen, you want to be my parents? You and me, Sheriff. I can't be with that guy.
Sheena, you want to pair? Oh, you already got it?
I got it shared.
We're gonna be way behind you.
We should fix it.
Are you I always left alone. Dan and I work a lot together. You all right with that?
Yeah, I get that. I hear that all the time.
We're being told what to do.
I love the best.
Do you want?
I can share with
Making the word best. They want, for health and human services, we're gonna have our own initiatives coming out of this process because usually informational officers are business, but it just makes it fun. So that's why that's but there was a chat on why can't everybody just right? Why am I right? So that is reframe. So I just think that
Sounds great. That's right.
Let's go around. Sorry.
Think with your inbox. I don't know.
Talk to this dude.
Yeah. Our purpose statement isn't here. It's like you're right, it's not. Yeah, which is one of my favorites. What did you say about these? I like this is where we get to this is like something
we felt like this was fine, but
yeah. Which sometimes it is. I really like it.
I mean, start with responsibly managing available resources. Right.
Okay.
That, I think, you would understand what that means to the issue.
Well, you guys never worked together?
Well, you're not the only men standing. You're the only guys left standing.
That one, I think. Yeah, I agree.
You don't have a partner?
Yeah.
Oh, because you never worked with the sheriff together?
Swimming upstream.
I see. So what I like about it is there's public work, employees that push back against that.
But that's another whole thing.
And putting the two together, I actually like it.
That kind of system with what you did. One by each of you they have say that his values and value, do we demonstrate that? That's
Starting the dog fight.
remember really similar. It's like your school. So how nobody's ever going to remember it.
I will say, and so people love integrity. Excellence.
Oh, I did?
He may not always.
I need to feel figure out where
And then they wanted equity and respect on
I like all the hallway.
I personally was very
So I'm hoping we know what that 12:30, it doesn't matter. It's 12, and there are cups in there or.
They would suggest
Thank you.
the one thing that
Well, if you put yellow.
you don't have to go back for yellow.
You can just grab them.
The one really.
Like I would like.
Hey, Rob, I just didn't
Yeah. So let's go back to the
This is something to tie in to like help folks understand. Or like I was.
So, yeah.
Or this is feedback from the when they.
And really, this ties into
Our yellow dot on.
Overachievers. First, oh, you guys are done too.
But we gotta do the first one.
Everything involves from what it is, all the things that are spread across the skills.
Just scratch it.
figured out.
Yeah.
More decisive.
Yeah.
Sometimes with that. So,
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Or you could say which one you're right.
We're gonna write the mission. I agree that it would be nice to clarify and.
Yeah, it is our value and we're always pursuing excellence, but it may not be a core value that we are always excellent because you can always do that. The thing about a value is you should never deviate from that. The vision is what a value is what we are. And yes, and if you are not that, you will find it.
Lend our voice.
Yeah.
The only issue with the meeting.
So vision,
Yeah.
we could say, you know, this is okay, but that's a hard one. I do not do vision statements.
To be the best.
Although they do on the left side have notes about the survey results, and I didn't read those. I might have to.
So on our mission, I wrote, it would be nice to clarify and add inspirations. It's okay, but no change in people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then excellence is two subjects.
Yeah.
We go stick that one. For my next year.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you, there you go.
You know, so. Okay.
It is, yes.
And, he's more university.
No, I'm with
Okay.
Mike and we're
Yeah, yeah.
No, I was joking.
So we're going to hit all the dots and then we're going back to research.
Okay, got it.
Right.
But you really tried. That's the German part.
Well, yeah, and so like.
That's mandatory.
And like figure it out.
Normally, we don't care about values. So then the question becomes, have these become more of our values that our team to lose equity? They're like generally on board.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Good morning. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good. What would your opinion be how Chief Justice's request?
Okay, and we did not put the strategic plan.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the request is. Say again.
The only thing that I would say about you
What would your opinion?
We don't necessarily whether.
is
So the obvious question is like, but it does sound like curious about do they in the house.
Right. I also feel like collective impact is
That would help me know
Okay.
the impact on me and Chris. Is it because of criminal workload or because of civil?
Okay, I don't know off the top of my head, but I can figure that out.
I think in general I'd be supportive.
I think we would too.
How do we say, look,
Nikki's pretty.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm more supportive of the state spending their money. So I'm okay with that.
Okay, cool. All right, I just was very keen to have your thoughts on that before I recommended that we take this.
No, I appreciate it. I can't think, as far as delivering people to court and that stuff, I don't think it would have a significant impact on us. What does jump out at me is courthouse security is our responsibility, and we talked before that the licensure program hasn't seen any adjustment in funding for over 10 years. It's barely hanging on, and then just our general fund deputy presence is much lower than in the county. Court presence, if you look at comparables, they have full teams just
So,
Right.
I mean,
All right, one more minute here.
Thanks for asking.
Of course.
This
I call it what?
house just passed barely. You happen to know
It's so, and this wasn't an appropriation. Confusing because the budget framework is separate from the appropriation. We always hear at this level, we think of it as one thing, and the state does it one thing. There, it's two different things. So, what this is basically give guidance to basically
Thank you, that's
How long is he home? So, but government shuts down in 3 weeks.
He comes and
Right,
goes.
so that's the next
He's
thing we're
off of
actually
his
looking at. Money side,
main,
so
he's
they've got until March.
on land.
So now that's got balance.
But he has to go back.
And the problem is the Senate has similar budget resolutions, they don't match, so those two have.
So he's not fully.
That will be happening in the background, but now they're going to focus on. So what everybody is saying, what Garson is saying, we're more likely to just get.
This week is an extra struggle to juggle trying to get childcare yesterday.
We're just going to. It would be the opportunity to get SRS in there.
I'm gonna bring us back together here. Close out any final thoughts that you have.
Sorry, that's what
And then I
get why.
shines at home, and that was the mistake. Okay, so if you can all come back to the table when you are done writing any last items here, and then we're gonna chat about each one of these pieces. All right, so I'm gonna start us over here with a vision statement. And this one was pretty good. We got a mix of yellows and greens. The survey responses to this one kind of mirror some of the comments that came up on the sticky notes too, which was that a lot of folks had the feeling that the word best really didn't resonate with people, feeling like the word best was kind of competitive, it was too much, it wasn't really what we're going for as a community. And I see some of the pieces up here as well kind of reflect that. There's also a suggestion of saying that this is a place where everyone can live their best lives. So kind of switching it around to say best in relation to the actual quality of life that people get to experience rather than saying we are the best county. Anything that folks want to add to that conversation in terms of potential updates to the vision statement? Was there anything beyond the word best that came up for you or anything that you want to emphasize or highlight there? Yeah.
we talk about, because a lot of feedback we've gotten, is this idea of competition, that a lot of folks don't like the competition, or maybe some people think it's like too general. So we came to this, we were thinking about our purpose statement that talks about to improve lives, and like actually what we're trying to aspire to is to help people live their best lives. Dan and I were together, Dan said something about, it's really about living the best lives. Like, that's a really good way to think about it, as opposed to like being the best as though we get an award for being number one. It's really about helping each person live the best life that they can live.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else on that topic, or are we generally feeling like if we come back and rework that term best, the rest of the statement's still resonating for folks? I'm seeing some head nods.
We did like the final sentence in the equity lens statement around, ensuring that all residents have the resources they need to thrive. So incorporating kind of a more positive, impact in terms of not just making it the best, but actually having the resources for our community members to do their best. So just liked that was already kind of a statement somewhere in our various priorities, and looking at some wordsmithing for that.
Yeah, that's great. And I think both of these comments really get to the idea of how can we switch this around so that it's not about like what is the county as an organization, but rather how is the county impacting the day-to-day lives of the people who live here, and making sure that we're focusing our vision on that element. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. We self-appointed us, Kachina and I, as the brevity team, I guess. So perhaps with Mr. Mokraiski's statement about, people and Dan being about, the people living the best lives, could the vision statement be shortened to just say Lane County is the place where people can live their best lives?
Yeah.
And let people plug into what that means, live, work, play, whatever. I mean, sometimes when we try to identify too many subject matters, it gets lost. People get lost at where they can actually plug in. I think it's a great statement, so thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think that's I love a brevity team, because ideally all of these statements are things that people can remember. And if they get super, super long, that makes it that much more difficult to like have that in your brain and use it on a regular basis.
And I think just to put an exclamation point on what you said, when we just reviewed all of these statements in Health and Human Services, we had about 500 staff participate in listening sessions. And in our department in particular, play was a term that didn't resonate, though people recognize that with Dan's team, it's the parks. Of course people are playing in the parks. So taking some of that detail out really does help make it more general and resonate more broadly within the organization.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I love what you just said, Eva, because different play means different things to different people.
Yeah.
We're playing cards here, or we just having fun on our way to work. So which we all try to have fun on our way to work. But my as we go throughout this whole thing, we have aspirational and realistic, and striking the realistic vision of that, because if we're too aspirational in things, then people say, oh, that's, we're not going to get that, so why even try? I mean, that's the risk you run. But to making it so that it's understandable for the first 520 and the first hour on the job is really important. And does best convey that? And what is the best? So I agree with the things that have been said. I love what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's some of the community survey feedback that we certainly got on this one, was just feeling like this feels a little disconnected from day-to-day life. So we want these statements to be aspirational, but they still have to be grounded enough in reality that people can feel something when they see that and feel inspired by it as well, without feeling put off by the concept if it's too kind of lofty. Yeah.
There's a term that I think Jesse probably understands that's used out on Highway 99 a lot, called world class. And I don't know if we want to use that term here, because we're not really trying to be world class. We want to be the best of the 380,000 people that we serve.
Yeah.
But as we get later on, we talk about service, and that's really where that's the key.
Yeah, well, and different ideas will come up, I think, in different ways through each of these statements too. So even if we take best out here, that might still show up in something like your values or some of these other areas. Great. Okay, then I'm going to move us forward, because mission was one that we got a lot of comments on here, and mostly yellows. And so this was one, I think that there was some feedback here around that mix between aspirational and tangible, because your mission statement really should be the answer to the question of like, what do we actually do as a county, right? What are we providing to people? So can we clarify and add something more inspirational? Can we add the concept of prioritization? Can we reorder to lead with the service delivery piece first, rather than saying we responsibly manage available resources to deliver these things? Can we instead say we deliver vital community services with passion, drive, and focus by responsibly managing, something like that? More specific, more focused, to deliver the most effective core services. So again, flipping those things, and then this one was also about flipping the order. So if we kind of flipped the order here so that we were more centering this statement, not taking out much in what's actually in the statement, but just putting that community-centered services first. I'm curious, thoughts, responses in this group to that. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't tell if you were going beyond me. I think the only other piece that I'm not sure we got our sticky is, if we say responsibly manage available resources, we're leaving out that part of our mission is to secure the resources. So, because if what's available isn't sufficient, we're not really meeting, that's not our mission.
Yeah.
To deal with the breadcrumbs, which is what we're doing a lot of the time. So somehow also, securing and managing, or being good stewards of securing and stewarding, or something like that.
Yeah.
But in the context of, yes, flipping and leading with the delivering services.
Yeah.
Because the resources are there in service to the services.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Any other thoughts on mission? Yeah.
Another brevity, sorry. Listening to what Commissioner Trigger just said about security kind of buzzed in my mind is that, our mission is what are we really committed to? What is it that every day we wake up and come to the office and continue to do regardless of the challenges and the things that might derail us, all right? So as a county, in my mind, we're committed to safe community and maximum livability for all to securely thrive.
Okay, say it one more time so Jesse can write it
Said
down.
we're committed to safe community and maximum livability for all to securely thrive.
Securely thrive. Great. Any responses, thoughts on that? Any of those words in there? Do we like some of those words? Maybe we bring some of that language in? Okay.
I'm not really understanding what maximum livability means.
Yeah.
So that might be just another phrasing
This is a
of
rough draft.
for people living their best lives or something like that, or thriving,
Yeah.
I think. But that might be that just a phrase is challenging for me.
If employees know nothing else about Lane County, they should be able to recite the mission statement and understand what it means. And that doesn't mean anything to do with, doesn't mean 520 on their job. So there's got to be something that people understand. I say salient up here.
Yeah.
So you taste it. You don't have to read it. You taste it. You know what it is. And so the mission statement, you have to be able to go, yeah, I understand that.
And it's not quite there yet in terms of.
I think we can do better. Yeah. I think the general concept is good, but we're not quite there.
Yeah. I'm curious on that. Oh, go ahead. Did you?
Well, I think it's a very accurately stated. I like the idea personally of flipping, because you sort of activate it a little bit more to say these are the things we do with whatever money we have available. I think. We could just say that. We could just say we do stuff with the money we have available.
Most of the time, it's great.
Yeah. Most of the time, it's really good. When we do it, it's really good.
And if money's not available.
Yeah. So I do like the idea of the flipping, because you activate it a little bit more to get to the point of what we're doing. I think the problem, to me, of all the things we have, the mission statement is very accurate, but it's also the least, it's the last thing I think people really think about or focus on, because it's really long, it's wordy, and it's sort of just a reflection of here's what we do. Right? Whereas the other things really are about how we go about doing it, what we're seeking. They're more aspirational. They're more about how we do the work. So Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that we don't have up here for review is that we have a purpose as a county, which is we improve lives. And honestly, if you're looking for brevity, people remember that.
Yes.
I do think we have to be thoughtful about making sure we differentiate the mission and the vision. That the vision is what we aspire to be, the mission is the core of who we are and why we exist. And so we don't want to include too much aspirational in the mission because that should be what we are every day. So, I think we want to keep that separate, but kind of calling out that we didn't put stickies by our purpose because it's not up here, but that exists.
Well, and that was actually, do you have a comment on that before you talk more about purpose?
Just another comment. Well, I just wanted for brevity, and to get to the services part, if we could just drop the first part, because maybe the first part is kind of the scarcity mindset, and if our mission is to deliver the services, then part of that is to try to get the resources we need. So
Yes.
Yes.
I also, while we're talking about resources, it's really easy, and we just did it at this table, to slip into that resources equals money, and resources is much bigger than just money. And so that's like a note that, because later we talk about stewardship of resources or assets, and just remembering that. And what Dan just said really works for me, is like, why do we even talk about our operational struggles in delivering the mission that's supposed to be loftier and more accessible sort of globally?
Yeah.
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 And I just feel like services doesn't capture all that we do. We support systems. We support this community network and connection. And so I love brevity. I think that's important. And services feels too confined for what we do here at the county and the diversity of work that happens.
Systems is a great word.
We also don't deliver everything. We do a lot of partnership with
That's
others
right.
who are delivering the services. So,
Yeah.
Partnership is something that strikes me. It's captured in our core behaviors for our work driven to connect, but also with our community as well.
Yeah. And I think that gets to that question of is our partnerships a core part of what we do, or are they a core part of how we do what we do?
Right.
And I feel like that we could probably talk about that for 3 more hours as well, but that might be another piece of this too. Like, are resources the core of what we do, or are they a means to an end as well here? Yeah. Did you have a?
I was just gonna say, in the context of brevity, we have 5 things up here, 6 if you include purpose statement. I think for some folks, it's hard to, myself included, it's hard to remember the collection of things, even if each of them is succinct and brief and to the point. If I played a matching game that had each of these and all the characteristics, I might get 50%. I would get core behaviors, I would get our purpose statement, and then some of it starts to,
Yes.
Some of it's homework.
This was a question that I actually had for this team, because this is the most number of statements that I have seen for a county, to be fair. Yes, you won.
Are we the best now? Best county at having a lot of words?
Yes. And I did want to ask, the purpose, I love the purpose statement because it's very to the point. And I wonder about having a purpose statement and having a mission statement, because usually those are more, the mission statement does describe the purpose of the organization. So I'm curious if anyone has thoughts on that, especially maybe from the last planning process. I see hand in hand.
Well, just one thing, there's a certain solemnity about the work that we do that's not like selling 2x4s. You save lives. You actually save people's lives. So there's a solemnity that if not for the work that we do, some people would die.
Yeah.
It really is that serious, the work we do. So how do we include that level of solemnity that's not just, hey, this is good stuff. We are really doing the things it takes to preserve people's lives, not just to better people's lives, but to keep them alive.
Yeah, thank you.
I did want to highlight something that does stick out to me along with our core behaviors are our strategic lenses. I think the lenses connect, our stewardship of resources takes the place of responsibly managed resources, right? So that's duplicative. So if we were sort of moving to more of a vision and a purpose,
the lenses do fill in a lot of those pieces, at least for me. And I look to those a lot because especially, the equity lens in particular, but each of those lets us pause, think about the actions we're taking and include other perspectives. So I really like those.
And that's the one nice thing too of having the combination is that we can kind of look to the different elements of these statements and say, where else are we capturing that? Especially in the strategic lenses where we have more room to play with. They're not meant to be a statement that you can remember right off the top of your head, right? They have more detail in them. So then maybe let's talk about values and core behaviors as well, because I think that these were the ones that had the most green in the room in terms of votes. On values, integrity, equity, and respect came in. Excellence seems like in this room we have quite a lot of feedback around the term excellence. And then I do want to highlight that from the survey results, equity and respect, there are quite a lot of comments about breaking these two things up so that these are different values rather than combining them into a single value statement. The concept of that these are, while they are interconnected, they are trying to actually capture very different values as well. So could we break those up? So on that, anything that folks want to add about the term excellence? We have things like it's too competitive a term, it's too subjective, it needs more clarity, and that this is tied to historically referenced language. So I'm curious about any context on that word. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I can share.
Yeah.
Excellence is terminology that is often tied back to a culture of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're trying to really bring awareness around that and pay attention to our language, this is a word that could elicit some other feelings in terms of as a value. Conceptually, I love it, but I think the language needs updating.
Okay. So the concept of we wish to be an excellent organization, A+, that word in particular, maybe we need to rework given some of the context there. Okay. Yeah.
My other thinking is that a core value should be what we hold people accountable to being. And if they are not performing adequately. And I don't know that excellence is really truly a core value for us in that respect. We do expect people to be in pursuit of that. But as a core value, you don't always have to hit it in order to be here and be successful and be a part of our community. And so I think that when we got feedback from Health and Human Services, it was like, well, is that really what we are all the time as a core value? Or is there some way that we can talk about, I think continuous improvement came up, or other thoughts and ideas about how we're always trying to get there?
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is interesting because one of the feedback on the survey was also, well, our core behaviors are really describing our values. So our core behaviors of passionate to serve, driven to connect, focused on solutions, that to me is almost a description of how the organization is saying this is how we are going to be excellent, by being passionate to serve, by being these other things. So I'm curious if anyone has thoughts on that piece too.
I do. I was just gonna use an analogy for anyone who's a football fan. I'm a Chicago Bear fan. If you're familiar with their stadium, it's Soldier Field. It's this old historic stadium, and when they were 20 years ago going to renovate it, they decided we don't want to tear up the old thing because it's historic, so let's leave it. So they literally built a spaceship stadium and set it on top of, and that's now the new stadium. So I think about our strategic plan a little bit that way, that we had the mission, vision, values that were the historic framework for our strategic plan, and then we sort of went, this isn't relevant in the ways that we really want. The values are sort of stagnant beliefs. We want something that's more active. Mm-hmm. So let's focus on behaviors, because behaviors, the way you create culture is by driving behaviors, right? So we're like, if we want a culture that is reflective of, our values, we actually have to articulate what our core behaviors are. And the reason we came up with our purpose statement is we're like, our mission statement talks about what we do, but we want to focus on why we exist. Mm-hmm. That's more important. So I use that spaceship example of like, we had this historic framework, but then we're like,
doesn't really exist, but we don't want to just do away with it.
Yeah.
So let's actually create some new framework, and now what we have is this sort of big list of all these things.
Yeah.
So there is an in my opinion, I will say, not at all surprising to me that the core behavior, I don't think there's anything but green on the core behaviors because they're relevant,
Yeah.
right? We use them regularly. I mean, I don't know what the percentage of employees, if you ask them what our core behaviors are, would say it, but more people could name those three than anything else on this board.
Yeah, correct.
Because we talk about it. And probably our purpose statement too, because it's very simple and we use it. And then there's a lot of the other stuff that there's some level of value, but it's not as relevant
Yeah.
for people. So I think there's an opportunity maybe for us to think about what's historical but isn't relevant, and then what is really critical and relevant today that we want to continue.
I so appreciate that metaphor because I'm wondering whether this is a moment where we can kind of better merge the old infrastructure and the new infrastructure. I'm curious if we tried to do some combination where we brought some of the ideas of the values into the core behaviors, or in some way combined those two statements, or got rid of the values altogether and just focused on the core behaviors. Any thoughts if we've tried to simplify in this area? Yeah.
Eve talked about striving. There's an old book, In Search of Excellence, trying to find what is the best. And something that when I look at Cliff over here and I look at the best practices, who's doing it the best? And how can we adapt who's doing it the best to what we're doing? And we look at our jail, for instance, which is a model for really probably the entire nation. Look at what we're doing in our jail. Employing the best practices, not that we invented, but that we strove. We went out and found them and brought them here. So how do we bring the best practices to play here in Lane County, not just in the jail, not just in human services and health, but across the board from the first moment on the job? What's the best practice?
Thank you.
I'm thinking about the audience for each of these things, and these are pretty internal. And if core behaviors is working for the people who are actually operationalizing the policy of the organization, I wouldn't tinker with them much, if at all. And if the values the values can become embedded, and some of that language is echoed in many of these other things. I'm seeing a lot of green around integrity in particular, so clearly that's something that's important to people, that we express integrity as a value, but whether we need to have a list of values that's a list of words is the best or right way to do that. And we could be more economical, but make sure that's embedded other places.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think it would be hard for me to lead if I could not reference core values of our organization. That core behaviors just isn't a term that everybody thinks about. So, I like to go back to the core values and say, this is what we have committed to as the values of our organization. So I wouldn't want to give up that term and roll it into core behaviors as a leader. And then I think if we lost equity as a term in our core values, that would be a tremendous loss for my group.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Was there another hand over on this side that I missed?
I don't know, but I like having values too, and I think our code of conduct is structured around the values as well, so that touches another piece of the organization.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I think this then will be a piece that we're going to probably continue to think about, but that's really helpful feedback for where we are today. Okay, I'm going to move us on to our last bit here, which is the strategic lenses. We've got a mix of yellow and green on here. The question of, do we actually use all of these regularly? There's some ideas of potentially repurposing some of the language that we have in the equity lens. Could we have these be briefer so that they're just one sentence to make it a little bit more memorable? And we don't use a true collective impact approach as some of the comments here. So anyone want to speak to anything on the strategic lenses?
I just wanted to add that I didn't mention that when we talked about core behaviors and purpose, but the strategic lens is also a newer version of what these are, like the way in which we're intending to make decisions, like sort of the filters or the lenses that we make all of our decisions are supposed to be reflective of this. When Dan and I were as partners looking at this, we felt like the equity lens we've spent a lot of time on, and we still have more work to do to have very clear, like a toolkit of how we do that. The other two, particularly collective impact, there's been less sort of investment and focus on how we, but again, the core behaviors and the lenses were intended to be these things that are activated. They're not sort of stagnant statements. They're more like, and they're really only valuable if they are used regularly in some way. And so our reflection was, these are good, but we need to do more with them, right? There's got to be more work put into how we actually utilize these lenses.
Okay, so if we're gonna keep them, we need to make sure that we're using them on an operational, day-to-day basis, it sounds like. Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
I would just say too, that collective impact, I wasn't me that was like, we don't have a true collective impact. That's true, like we should be very careful. That is a framework with very specific pieces, and that we are not the backbone necessarily. So I do think we want to unpack that a little bit more. To me, that states that we don't do this alone. Like this has to be done in connection with our community, and we are a piece of that puzzle, and we should be always looking in the mirror and saying, is it us that steps up? Is it a partner that steps up? Do we do it together? But like it's part of that lens. And then the last thing I'll say, just to reiterate the conversation that we had, the brevity is important here. I can see this being a quick sentence, brief, and then we point to more tools like the equity toolkit to help us operationalize that. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is just to even see it up on this board. Yeah.
Katrina, can I ask you a question? Is this a place where that might be where we call out the systems work, our own systems and the systems we impact or intersect with? Is that maybe the reworking, so we're not using a phrase that has a particular practice and meaning that isn't what we're doing?
That's a great point for the collective impact, because that's the systems piece, right? Yeah, that's more than services.
So making sure like systems, partnerships versus using collective impact, which is a term with a very specific technical
Like copier versus Xerox.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
We'll use copier for the next version. Great.
Tissue's not clean.
And I guess one of the connections I wanted to make to why I really appreciate the lenses is, we talk about speed and efficiency and being fast, but in technology, which is, the world I live and breathe in, things are changing so fast. Technology allows us to move so fast these days, especially someone born in the 70s, think back to how slow things used to be. Having lenses and building in pauses and being thoughtful is more important than ever, in my opinion. Especially with AI moving forward and our data, more accessible and being pulled together and what it could do. So anyway, that's just another reason why I think the lenses are important.
Are helpful. That's great. Excellent. Okay. Well then, we're going to close out this piece of the feedback. And as you will notice, we did not make any decisions, but we have heard what you have shared, and then we're going to be on our side, thinking about how we can incorporate that and then bringing drafts back to you all for our next work session together, or potentially in between now and the next work session as well. So thank you for the discussion. Thank you for the input here. Do we need a 2-minute break at this point in time? How are we feeling? Yes.
Email, water, restroom.
Yep. 3-minute break. A 3-minute break. There we go.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Oh, I can't turn down. Tea's cold. It might be a 5-minute break.
analysis. For everybody who loves acronyms, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So when we redo strategic plans, Amy Rose mentioned right at the outset, extremely helpful to get an updated SWOT analysis so that when you are developing the next iteration of your plan, you can really think about building on and continuing to promote and work and use your strengths to your advantages. You have an understanding of weaknesses, challenges, things internally that might get in the way of achievement of anything outlined in the strategic plan. And then you have an idea of all of the things outside of the organization that can impact you. Again, really thinking about building on strengths, addressing weaknesses, and then just recognizing your external environment and how that has changed. So, internal factors, strengths and weaknesses, those are things positive or negative, right, that affect the organization's ability to achieve its goals. So, when we look at putting together strengths, weaknesses, we look at an organization's people, processes, systems, and culture. Externally, those are all of the things that you don't necessarily have control over in your environment, but do impact your ability to achieve your target outcomes. So all of those things. I think we heard earlier today, advancements in technology and AI. That's a really big factor that is often outside of your control, but impacts your ability to achieve the work that you set out to do. Industry trends, changes in industries, and politics, funding availability, all of those things are huge drivers and can absolutely influence your ability to achieve any goals or initiatives that you set out to do. So when we are looking at putting that together, we have, like I said, that snapshot. So all of the feedback that we gathered from the board, from staff, from the community, came into kind of the results of these strengths and weaknesses. We're going to do a similar activity where we'll go through these and review them and get your perspectives. Anything surprising, sound about right, anything that you would clarify, anything that you would add. So at a very high level, strengths and weaknesses. So strengths, 10 out of 10, you all scored the best marks for people and culture. There was so much positive feedback about the work that staff does, all of the work that has gone into employee development, all of the, as is evidenced by a lot of poaching that happens of your staff and people that move on to other roles. You have really strived to build and focus and promote and cultivate staff, and that showed up unprompted, and we made sure that nobody knew this was going into their performance evaluation. It came up in every single interview that we had. So people and culture, the investments that you are making in those areas is really paying off, and it is contributing to you being more effective at delivering your services. And so that was a really important piece. We could see very clearly the connection between cultivating staff, cultivating that excellence, providing employee development, and how that shows up in your service delivery. So that was a really important piece there. Other strengths to think through, the one I randomly pointed to was dedicated staff who care about the community. So yes, that was that. The other piece, recognized as industry leaders. This was another strength that was really interesting that came up a lot. You all are involved in a lot of different community organizations and associations, and we heard a lot about how people look to you to be the standard, to be kind of the best practice resource, to be kind of the leader of kind of how it should be done. People sit up and listen when you have things to say. People sit up and listen when you have constructive comments, you have recommendations, you have questions. And so that was something, and you are deeply embedded in a lot of community partnerships and organizations. I think that showed up in spades. And so that engagement really was kind of paying off as well, seen as being leaders. Proactive management kind of fees, good financial stewardship and resources and management, really thinking about getting the team together, understanding and identifying issues early on, and being very solution oriented. So this was something that we also heard a lot about, where when you are confronted with an issue or with a challenge, the team really dives into how can we figure it out. So we didn't get the impression, didn't hear a lot about people stewing on things, using these issues to be really divisive, people kind of being very territorial over issues. It really was, we feel great about bringing the collective brain trust together to solve some really complex challenges. As a county, you are facing things like homelessness, the impacts of Measure 5 and 50, the availability of funding sources, like all of these things are really big, they're really complex. When you are looking at the county, a lot of times the things that you have to deal with are not things that you can deal with on your own. And so really cultivating and being part of the community, being engaged in those solutions is really important and a strength. So then weaknesses. So weaknesses, challenges, we're all very, I'm a middle child, it's all very like positive, these are just opportunities for improvement, right? And so this is kind of not surprising when you are focused on employee development and people, processes and systems were the kind of main area where there are opportunities for improvement. Opportunities to kind of think about, okay, what systems are working for us? How is our technology working for us? Is it outdated? Are we using it to the fullest capacity? Has it been fully adopted? Has it been fully implemented? Do we need to make big changes, adopt new systems, upgrade certain things because it has been working in the past, but now maybe it's being sunset or changing, or there's a better way to do it because our service environment is changing. Processes, still quite a few manual processes. So when we get into pulling data, everybody, the room universal nodded, yes. So manual processes, so lots of people intervention, manual spreadsheets, those kinds of things. So opportunities really to kind of figure out, okay, how can we get better about streamlining these things, using our technology. I think those working together hand in hand, there's no confusion about why that is. Thinking about how you all can work together to be more efficient, kind of reduce the number of process steps. Other potential weaknesses or challenges, so balancing service delivery expectations against the availability of funds and resources. I think as a county, you will never be short on people needing things. The community, cities, partnerships, state, you will never be short on needs. You will be short on funds. And you will be short on personnel. So really thinking about balancing those in order to manage expectations around service delivery with what you do have available, while also having a mind on knowing what you are able to secure. So again, kind of really thinking about making sure that that stays really focused as you are moving forward kind of into the next 3 years.
One piece that I'll just add to that I think is on here as well is the concept of how do we get better at prioritizing so that we're not spreading our resources quite so thin.
Yes.
And I imagine that that's going to come up quite a lot in this process because it's really easy to make a strategic plan that's a grab bag of every wonderful idea you've ever had. And the county is not, that's not going to be useful for you, right? So we need to have that as a concept. And obviously for strategic planning, we won't be going into every single budget detail, all of those pieces. But we do need this group to bring that as part of this process too, because I think that this is an important moment to say, how do we get better at this? We know it's been identified as a challenge for us as an organization.
Yes. These are organized alphabetically, and you can see prioritizing work to ensure that core services and that prioritization aspect being a really important part of kind of this next strategic plan. So the last thing that we kind of want to think about and really address on its face quite clearly is that there are growing divides between political priorities and agendas, right? And that is simply something that when we have a really diverse population, figuring out where is the common ground, what is the solution, how can we build on our strengths of coming together as a team, being able to have these conversations, being respectful, being able to talk about these, being able to work through to the solution when you have these divided priorities, different priorities, you have different perspectives, and that's okay. It's incredibly normal to have that, but how can we work on using that to our advantage so that we can bring thoughts together, so that we can gain consensus, so that we can kind of use this as a tool in order to make sure that we are able to continue moving forward and not get stalled by any of those perspectives, right? So it's a supernatural part that we always talk about when we are kind of looking at big groups, different priorities, and how we can come together in a unified strategic plan. So then we have opportunities and threats. These are all of the outside things that are coming together. that you may not have an impact on, but impact your ability to kind of achieve your goals. So, from an economic standpoint, honestly, this is kind of one of my favorite things to look at because it's very fascinating, and I always like to pretend that I'm Kyra's doll. So, increasing jobs. So, the total number of jobs, interestingly, in Lane County has increased. So, there's opportunity out there. We're also looking at increased personal income. So, per capita personal income has increased for 4.4%, which is really interesting, which means that there are more people out there who are able to engage and participate in kind of community activities and services. Partnerships with nonprofit organizations, that's a strength, that's an opportunity. So people are interested in partnerships. A lot of municipalities, a lot of local government, a lot of not-for-profits are facing similar situations that you are. So limited funding, uncertain funding sources, needing to diversify their revenue streams, and facing an onslaught of needs, right? No shortage of needs in the community, shortage of what we are able to effectively deliver on. So people are interested in partnerships, interested in saying, how can we work together to solve these really complex problems or ones that are quite large? So thinking about opportunities there. Other opportunities, increasing focus on sustainability, focus on public health, and adoption of new technologies. People are very tech savvy. So what could it look like? To adopt new technologies. I think technology is becoming more sophisticated, which can also help make it more affordable, and can also make it a little bit easier to make incremental steps if you are looking at making those upgrades. Threats. So changes in demographics that require adjustments to service delivery. So as you are looking at kind of your community, your geographic area, as that grows, as those demographics change, you are looking at potentially needing to adjust how people, your service delivery, but then also how people access your services. One of the big pieces of conversation was engagement in the community and what resources are provided in different languages, in different formats, in different channels or different arenas. Is it a newsletter? Is it a webinar? Is it a town hall? Right? How are those community demographics really driving changes to how you are communicating and delivering services? So changes to city services that might impact what you are doing and what you need to fill in as gaps. So that's very important, right? So thinking also about what's going on at the city level and where there are challenges there, right? Those are not often things that you have control over, but might impact what you get asked to do. So just being aware of and continuing to stay in touch with that. Diminishing public trust in government, I think goes without saying. It's definitely a trend that we are seeing nationwide, so not unique to Lane County for sure. Increasing cost of housing. This is a really big one also because housing is a really important driver of people's ability to thrive, right? And the different types of housing. So we have workforce housing, we have kind of multi-family housing, we have affordable housing, the whole housing stack. Just is becoming more expensive. Cost of goods and materials is more expensive, cost of land is expensive, cost of personnel is more expensive. All of that is coming into kind of the increased cost of housing prices. This always goes without saying cybersecurity risks. That is just kind of a natural part when we have, it's the flip side of the coin, when we have advancements in technology and we do more things, they are more attractive to cybersecurity risks and breaches. So just continuing to be aware of that. Unemployment has risen somewhat, right? So 10.4% between 2023 and 2024. It's a little bit higher than the national average. So just kind of thinking about that unemployment, how it impacts your service delivery model and kind of what's needed and just understanding your community. Natural disasters and climate change. So that was one. I think we heard in interviews you all had like a 4-year streak of a major disaster one every year between a flood, a fire, an earthquake, or something. And so you got the string of practice on what's needed to cultivate really well thought out emergency response and disaster plans. So just being aware that that's, again, kind of something that's been part of the past. You have some really strong practices and people in place in order to continue strengthening your emergency planning and response, but again, just kind of being aware of that. Reductions in state and federal funding and shifts in local, state, federal political landscapes that impact priorities. So, same activity that we did last time, only instead of going through the foundational statements, you're going to go through the SWOT analysis. So same traffic light exercise, red, disagree, yellow, have questions, green, want to emphasize this. And then stickies for anything that you would like to add. Again, this is kind of the culmination of what we have heard in our understanding of your operating environment, your community environment right now. So let's talk about it. So we'll do that same activity. We encourage you to work in partners, but a different partner than you worked with last time. I know, it's so tough. Yes, and so we'll give you about 10 minutes to go through each one of those and provide your thoughts. And then we'll do the same thing as last time, we'll chat through it.
Okay. Okay, so just a reminder real quick before we break out, the mics are still active and live in the public, so any side conversation, please be aware. You've been warned. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great reminder.
Good? Yes, let's go.
I'm gonna look across the room. I know.
You got it.
I got it.
All right.
And you two were last time. Yeah. Okay.
I can't imagine.
Where do you want to start?
Not much room over there. I don't know how we're gonna get in there, but we can stand up here.
Oh, no.
We had our interview.
Hey, Jeff.
You can be 3.
Yes. We're forming a line.
Are you sure, Katrina?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. I don't.
You don't? You're good?
Did anything like stand out as you were talking?
So probably like the same one.
The only thing at risk of being wordsmithy is what I often think of, and like is used that is a way of expressing combination strengths, which is innovation.
Some of it really or in like income figures, what do I do?
Actually, I think all residents.
Sometimes you have to prioritize
I did have a question about, when you said
It might be a
or maybe that's not
well, we have some that we work with public works on some.
Well, I'm interested in what any of those things. Well, there's every time I drive by, I heard that one.
Going on a little, but it's not like.
Yeah, they got one of those places that when it's really
It's not my nose. Yeah, I know.
People wanted to do that meeting where it's
right. Not only we go the last snow, or they feel like there should be control things, it's informal. So I think it's fair.
Yeah, and it's like how.
We don't just have to regular stuff.
And it's hard. It's hard to make all 2,000. I mean, I've got 800 in my area, and it's hard to make I come every week, someone says, or I'm sure.
To get.
I didn't say.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
For example, there was probably an email that went out that taught me Microsoft was completely different. And I probably am really on that
And activities we engage in.
I think our work is done.
The org chart's the worst. That gets, I was just about to say, we have to separate it.
There's no other way to do it. There are literally pilots that
Well, look at where it is.
A lot of reactive.
Thanks for cheating with us, you know.
We might have to kind of pull up. What are we saying?
I know, yeah, it's like, all this thing, sure, boxing out. We're just gonna stand in front of the strings. Right, I thought that when she did the strings, I'm like, can we just stop?
Basket and
stop and like hold the meeting?
Who's going to disagree with you?
I'm not gonna put a yellow. Here's the conversation for us to give you. The other one was when I said, and another thing that's really important right now, to be mindful of this is.
What do you
Doing oh, Steve, we should put a big green right there, right on that one, you know?
Yeah, can we just like tape some of these together?
I know Laura said, I feel goosebumps.
We'll put that as a sign on the block.
Yeah. I do question this. I wonder about this one. I appreciate that it's green, but I think we also resonate with
a lot of it's just well, they're almost like, but
I think we need to embrace our reality here.
Are we going to be moving over here?
No, somewhere going on.
Okay. Look at how incredibly efficient we are.
we're good.
Oh, yeah.
Over there, like,
norovirus has been going on. Oh, we've gotten it like twice now since last summer. We got it about packing about a year ago. That was
I know, it's hard to find.
Are we talking like catastrophic? The rest of us, we were out for like it was. Do you have any info?
It's a lot. There was
This is the one
If you've been vaccinated.
I know, like, okay.
But they don't get rid of it.
It's like the first winter not respiratory. There's nothing major, but we've had norovirus and we've got like, well, those are solid. I got Sophie gave me
Anything else?
parvovirus. Yeah, and in adults. Usually it is, so I was one of those rare adults.
Which is good.
Just got so quiet.
I'll provide cover by talking loud.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, they totally could. Oh, yeah, they're here last night too. So we have a good amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our board coordinator is going
Saw your little post-its yeah, they're not picking up like when my kids play, like we need to. They're so
I'll update like our strategic planning website. Have like a review there. It's always best to take a second pass. We use whatever photo. Yeah, like a one-stop shop for folks.
That's so good.
And right now it's like, well, that is like the central business.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's great.
Okay, about 1 more minute, final thoughts, stickies, and dots, and then we'll come back together.
Yeah, I never upload PowerPoint. Yeah.
There weren't notes, or like there weren't major notes, but yeah,
Yeah, because you can, yeah. Which you can still integrate with the file, but it's more difficult.
yeah, it's like little
Yeah.
I was just wandering down.
But I think this title will probably go pretty quickly, and then we'll spend a good amount of time on this.
Okay, yeah, because this is more just for you. I put stuff in, so we can make it faster. It's a laboratory.
Yeah, exactly. That's what this whole section is about.
And my hip.
I'm looking to hear more about how.
Like what they want in the work to do. Not like, I need not but like, what's the work that you do, how can you serve that? And then they took that back. And then they're like, here's what we heard.
Yeah, exactly. And like, what did we get right? What do we still want to edit? And I think that's just
yeah. Well, we give it something that they can look at and be like, I like that, I don't like that. And someone's like, I like this, I don't like that. And then we come back and we're like, how's this?
yeah, exactly. So that's our where are the that's great. Can't hit all of your
I was at first, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, meditated.
Yeah.
Okay. Just being we just do a quick huddle and I'm driving straight to the airport. At least it's close. But there's only like so much work done.
It's true, yes. If we don't make enough, like, then we're into a little less. But honestly,
As long as I make it to Seattle, I'm always confident that I'm going to make it home. Because I'm like, they're not going to want to put me up overnight.
yes, exactly.
I'm going to pull out of this real quick because I forgot about the teams thing. Are you going to be
Maybe not, and trying to use it more strategic, I know the impact that my boss has really shifted my mindset. I'm like, no, because I can't look out when we're having a state of there's thousands of other websites, like, right?
Okay, everybody, I'm just bring the room back together. Okay, final thoughts on the SWOT analysis.
That's what we've been talking about with
Lots and lots of good stuff.
city.
Yeah, we can even have some.
No,
I'll make a note.
I used to have like an actual proper chime to bring the room back together.
That's all I was
Well, maybe just have the sheriff.
Yes, exactly. It's just too quiet, coyote.
The chair has a gavel, you can start pounding on the table.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I have a whole team now.
Oh, yeah.
Cheer them up.
Okay, small victory moment. My daughter just here.
Can we get a gavel?
Do you mind doing a gavel to get folks?
Bring everyone back to work with your gavel.
Okay, let's get back to the table here. I've been told to pound on the table. So there you are.
Don't act like you hate it.
Alright, Jesse, how are you looking?
We're looking really good. Okay, everybody is yes on the strengths. So, really nailed it. We have one lone yellow on positive interdepartmental collaboration. Yellow, a question about this item. So, is anybody feeling brave enough to ask about what this means, or?
Well, I think Steve and I talked about it, or I don't remember who put the yellow sticky on, but reconciling that with internal.
Elaborate.
It's so right. Reconciling those two things, I know for me that has been over the years, the internal communication or cross-departmental communication has been maybe not a struggle, but something we know we wanted to be better at. So just learning more about, like, maybe I'm wrong, right? I hope I'm wrong, right? Maybe it is going well and there's no improvement to be made. So just wanting to learn more about that.
I will retire the day that I walk into an organization and communication is star-spangled. So that is a really good point. And the difference between communication and collaboration, when we think about what this is, there's a lot of goodwill towards each other and working together. Departments see one another's value. They kind of think about engaging other people based on the services they provide, the expertise that they have. So there isn't a hesitation to reach out and engage with different departments. I would say universally, there are always opportunities to strengthen communication, to make sure the right message gets to the right people in the right kind of way. Because communication is kind of like data. You can get a lot of it, not all of it is easy to filter through. And so really thinking about how that could be dialed in. So that's a great point. Was that same?
Oh, sometimes I think we think we do this well and we see the collaboration, but our employees don't. It's been low in the last 2 surveys we've done.
Okay, yeah. That's really great feedback.
Go ahead, you first. Well, we didn't put a sticky up there, but Steve and I, and then we also heard some others talking about you led off on this, on the strengths with the amount of positive feedback around the culture. So some curiosity, or I think it stuck some of us is curious as to whether there was a difference in that sentiment for supervisors and managers versus line staff, right? We all strive for a positive, really good culture. And maybe we think it's that way, but then there's, we hear from staff, sometimes that isn't always landing right, or they may feel differently. So I don't know if there's any data points or metrics to help with that, but it was.
Yeah, I think we asked in a staff survey, we can.
Yeah, what I'd love to do is we can break that out when we provide the full survey responses. If we see any trends, we got that request already for the survey respondents who self-identified as being part of a marginalized community as well. So we could see when we provide the full results back, we can break out if there's any very particular distinctions in the responses that we're seeing there and for the manager versus frontline employees.
And I also saw a connection between that and our process inefficiencies. So I think for me, that's one intersection because there's a lot of diversity in the way we're accomplishing the same tasks. So they're doing the same thing, but in different ways, and we lack a common language and process approach.
Yeah, okay, great.
There's a hand over here.
Yes.
Hi, I'm no longer a fly on the wall. So I didn't participate in the activity, but this one in particular, I think that we have a lot of strength within our relationships, right? So once you know who to go to, the collaboration is great. But what we can really kind of influence and get better at is offering structured opportunities to collaborate. And I say that as a somewhat newcomer. I've been here 3 years. Now I feel like I can collaborate, but it was like, who do you know and how you get to meet people? So offering more opportunities for collaboration would generate more of that sort of collaboration. The relationship piece is great, but you need to know who to go to. Like oftentimes, like I would send an email. Judy remembers this in the beginning. I'd send an email and it's like you're sort of bouncing of like who you're going to. But once you have them, it's amazing. But it takes a lot of effort to get there without those natural structured opportunities for collaboration, even across departments.
Yeah, great perspective. Okay. Yes.
That was wonderful. And along those lines is, I think there's a certain amount of maybe jealousy sometimes. I'll use the term jealousy in between departments that we don't want to collaborate because we're doing it the way we do it. And why would we share what, I don't know that I see that necessarily in Lane County, but it's a natural thing where if one department's doing something well, I believe the other departments should see how they're doing it well and see if they can adapt it and have that kind of collaboration, not just in the work that we do, but in how we do our work. And if the department's doing well, you tend to think, well, that's great for them, But does that go along with a little bit with what you say, Latife?
I mean, I could maybe see that, maybe because we have the word best and all those things. I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I don't know that it's competition. I think it's because we have so much work to do with little resources, it's hard to intentionally create spaces where we're just collaborating. That sort of falls into, that's not like survival mode, right? So it's those intentional opportunities. So for example, when we have our leadership summits, which only happen once a year, and we bring people together, like people naturally, like they're generating all these amazing ideas. So how do we create that in a more sort of frequent basis so that we can collaborate across departments and even within our own departments? Like we are better together, right? Those ideas are better together, but we just don't have a lot of formal structured ways of doing that.
And that's
sharing success, excuse me.
Yeah, that's a really good segue into some of these internal communication and a sticky about intentional collaboration. Yes.
Yeah, I can't even remember where the sticky went because we weren't clear where it went, but it's a broad, I think it went there. Latife just raised a perfect example of what we were trying to get at, which is priorities tend to the casual eye, indicate this is most important, which by default sort of implies some things aren't as important, and that can be a trap, like, well, then why are we doing them if they aren't important? But also that sometimes your priority, you have to work on things that make the conditions possible to achieve your priority. So your order of operations isn't always the same as your priorities because you have to work on a thing, like you have to make time for collaboration to make it even possible to achieve success in these priority areas. Does that make sense? So like how we talk about priorities is we have to be really careful and thoughtful about it so that we So it doesn't always look like you could tie the activities a person is engaging in or spending their time on, it doesn't always directly tie to a priority, because sometimes it's working to create the possibility for that priority to even happen.
Yeah, it's building
And that's a great example of it. It's a very
infrastructure.
intangible, it's, exactly.
Yeah, all of the things that you need to put in place that may not be represented on the surface.
And that they're not all just check boxes. We did that. It's done now. The priority's accomplished. It's like it's ongoing and iterative sometimes, and it's about that systems piece that Katrina keeps bringing up that's so important.
Yeah, I saw there's a sticky here about clarity and agreement on how we prioritize in the activities to help us realize.
That's what I couldn't remember where we started.
We find that strengths, weaknesses, and then also opportunities and threats. There's a lot of comments here. Also a threat. A lot of these are often kind of opposite sides of the same coin when we are looking at them, and they are. I heard someone say like it's all connected. Yes, yeah, it's absolutely all connected. Okay, so perfect. Thinking through weaknesses, we have a lot of kind of agreement here, a couple of yellow dots, that internal communication piece, so thinking about opportunities to make sure that communication is intentional, that it could be always improved to make sure that people are engaged really thoughtfully. There is another sticky about kind of use of meetings and making sure that those are effective. So more isn't always better, but making sure that the time that we do have together is really efficient. So do we have the right people? Do we have kind of outcomes of this so that when we leave a meeting, we just didn't come up with more questions, but we maybe have a direction moving forward. And so it's that always kind of leaning forward perspective when you get the opportunity to come together. And then there is one around making sure that there are intentional opportunities to collaborate. So looking at what you do have in place and then just doing that evaluation. Does this include the right people? Do we have the right outcomes? Is it kind of focused on the things that we need, not only to address kind of this initial priority, but all of the infrastructure, all the supportive pieces that need to be put in place in order to achieve that. Anything else around kind of communication, internal communication that we haven't talked about yet?
Sheriff Harold had a point that he whispered to me about what happens in leadership meetings and how it is disseminated to the rest of the teams.
I was just sharing this. We have a communications team for our corrections division where line level individuals from each of the various programs meet with the sheriff and chief deputy and the captain once a month so that they can hear things straight out of our mouth rather than cascaded down. Yeah. And then they share, they go back to their work units and share. Minutes are kept during the meeting. Those go out monthly, so anybody that didn't already hear can check those.
Nice.
We do it on both sides, but it's, I think, most impactful in the corrections division.
Great. Okay. Everybody took notes on that? Effective cascading communication tactics?
Maybe just one comment on that. I think we sometimes struggle we're doing this around things like the federal transition with all the changes happening, trying to figure out, and our own budget process, what things do we need to communicate internally from the organization, and then what things need to be communicated within the departments, right? We have over 2,000 employees, like 10 departments. Most employees relate to their team they work on and their department that they're in, first and foremost, before they relate to being part of the county.
Yeah.
But certain messages are important to come from the organization as a whole, and then certain messages are unique. And so just that kind of, I don't know if it's sometimes tension, or like the sheriff is talking about communications that are coming within the sheriff's office, from leadership in the sheriff's office to all the employees. And that's probably where most of the communication needs to happen. But then there occasionally are things where people want to know what's happening with board decisions or policy, policy changes and funding changes that might be more of an organizational thing. So that tension between organization versus unit communication.
Yeah. Okay. Any other communication? The other sticky dot on here is outdated technology, a one lone dot. But then also a sticky. So it's not just about the technology, it's about the resources that it takes to adopt it. Because step one is great, we've identified this system. Step two is great, now the big shift of getting people trained on a new module, a new practice, how those processes are impacted, who that impacts, and then all of those kind of subsequent changes that flow down from that. So I think this note is just really being considerate about the effort that's involved in like a technology transformation and who's involved in that process. Anything else around kind of outdated technology is just a weakness or something that might get in the way of achievement of any kind of goals or initiatives that we might talk about. Yeah.
I think, I'm not sure which of those it's on, but to talk about like process and process improvements and things like that, a lot of it ends up driving towards technology changes. And in our organization, the resources that TS has is limited in some of those areas. They do great work with who they have. And so, you know, it's the struggle with, well, we can go through all this process improvement and come up with these great things, but if the resources aren't available to implement those, like how do we think about doing that in a more holistic way so that we're focusing on, with the resources we have available, which processes should we be looking at for improvement so that, and I know we've got like some things in place now to do that, but it still comes with some struggles, right? Because there are so many things that people can do, and we have to say, well, but which of those is going to have the most benefit for the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And really recognizing and being thoughtful about the fact that technology has never been a silver bullet. It has never been the solution. There is no single technology that has just magically transformed and made anything better. So being really thoughtful about what updates do we need to make, and being very realistic about what improvements is this actually going to impact. Yes.
And I think also we have some really amazing technology that we don't know how to use. So I often worry we're using this much of it, like project management. We need tools for that. We have Microsoft Planner. Do any of us know how to use it? Very few. So like those little pieces could be huge tools, I think, for our leaders, our staff. But again, we have to decide where we're going to prioritize resource.
Time for
yeah,
training,
but
right.
that's an efficiency piece. Like if we have a tool that we know how to operational, we already pay for it. Let's learn how to use it.
Sometimes it's not a new thing. Sometimes it's just being more proficient at the thing that you have.
Or choosing one. Teams, SharePoint, Insight.
I would also say that generically stating that we have outdated technology is not true. So I think about, we just implemented the national state-of-the-art electronic health record in our community health centers clinic. There is nothing better in the country. Everyone is striving to do it. We had grant funds. Most people can't afford it. We received COVID funding and we could do it. So like most small clinics like us, or small medical groups. So there are places where we are absolutely cutting edge. And then there are other places where we don't have control. So, you know, the state mandates what system we use. Or we have mandates around federal requirements that limit our ability to have systems that, and it's not just the system itself, it's also the back end of the data where we can connect across systems. So I think, anyway, it's just, that's a little too simplistic, which is probably where the yellow came from.
Fair point. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and add, you know, and so where the opportunity from that comes from, it's what you said about, you know, technology isn't just gonna, it's not always just the thing, the magic bullet. It's a tool. You have to have the humans that are using the tool, learning the tool, knowing about what's available, but it can spark creativity about, okay, if we're not gonna be able to access it this way, then what are the other things that we can be doing with available resources that we're not right now? And that we have seen some drives come through with people getting together and saying, oh, well, let's try doing it this way. And it's a big improvement with the tools that we have. So, you know, we do have a spectrum.
Yeah, great.
I'm going to do a quick time check. We have about 4 more minutes on this one, so I want to make sure that we have plenty of opportunity and threat discussion time.
Yeah, anything else that want to make sure gets said about weaknesses? Okay. A collage of opportunities and threats. So some green, right? We'll talk about the high points first, right? So partnerships, lots of green there. Increased cost of housing as a threat, absolute agreement and awareness there. Awareness of natural disasters, reductions in state funding, have some really good stickies about unfunded mandates. That is a big word. All of the things that you get asked to do that you don't necessarily have the funds for or not, don't come with the funds to do it. that showed up as a threat, but then also a weakness. So just bringing that into the conversation that there's going to be a batch of unfunded mandates that are coming down the pipeline. State mandates. So those are the ones that have some consensus, have some agreement around. Then we have a little bit more stickies and yellows around changes to city services, leading to potential increased demands in county services to fill gaps. So I have a couple of yellows here. Any questions, any points? What do we want to clarify kind of about this potential threat, or just something that is in our operating environment that might impact our strategic plan?
I didn't put a yellow.
I didn't put a yellow either, but you asked the question and the first thing that jumped to my mind is the city deciding they needed a fire service fee based on square footage, and the Lane County Jail has quite a bit of square footage. And finding ways to tax other government organizations when we are not able to tax other government organizations.
Okay.
But it wasn't my yellow, so sorry. I probably shouldn't have jumped out there.
That was a good point. I saw it.
No, that was a great yellow. But the thing that we were talking about was how much does the county need to shoulder? I mean, obviously, for example, we had a hospital that closed in here, and the county's reaction was, well, we need a hospital in Eugene. So how much of that is burdened on the county that we can actually do versus actually what we're legally obligated to do? So that was some of that discussion.
Great point. What are we obligated to do? What is mandated? What do we absolutely kind of at our baseline need to make sure we have covered? And what are the things that we get asked to do that are above and beyond that? It's a really great point.
And then I think that partnership is critical. Like, I'm just taking the housing piece as an example. We each have our different levers, and we have to be in it together, because if we're fighting each other and arguing, we're not going to get to a place that supports our community need.
Yeah.
So I think there's a ton of opportunity in that space, and we're doing great work there, but we need energy to stay there.
Yeah, absolutely. Another hand?
Thanks. Yeah, I think I added to what Katina's saying about housing too. It's just some of the terminology that we're using now is becoming outdated. I'm going to make a point about affordable housing.
Yeah.
Housing's not affordable anymore. I mean, I built it, so I know it's $390 a square foot was our last project, and so we're facing now LMDs asking the board for a 22.5% increase in fees. We keep having increasing fees based on economics that increase and inflation, and so it continually makes housing unaffordable. So we have to figure out a way to either make strides in that with smaller houses and change the terminology to where we're not actually telling people maybe there's something affordable, but you're not getting it because of some reason. I think that's where some of the communication disconnect is coming about housing. The reality is housing's expensive. How are we going to face it?
Yeah. And looking at holistically the housing stack is always something that we have a lot of conversations about, because you have a really diverse population here. So you have students that are kind of just exiting kind of local colleges and universities. They don't necessarily need a house, but maybe they need a nice apartment. Sometimes you have kind of, maybe young families that are coming together, also maybe need a smaller house, smaller square footage, or a larger house, or transition. And it all just kind of starts to work together when you kind of think about providing this space for people to thrive, to be able to live in the county, and kind of looking at that whole picture, having it all come together for sure. And the inflation, you're absolutely right. A couple of stickies calling that out as well, for sure. That's it's a huge obstacle.
Just the other piece of it.
Yes, and then you did raise your hand also.
Go ahead.
Just two things really quickly. We all pay an income tax for police services in Eugene. Anybody who works in Eugene pays an income tax. What effect does that have on our county? It does. And the second is a quote that came out this morning. Addressing the housing affordability crisis means looking under the hood of every fix we can find. That is an old friend, Tina Kotek, said that yesterday.
Our good friend Tina. Yes.
So also to housing, it's not just, the affordability is directly related to the availability.
Yeah.
And so when it talks about, I can't see from here, but what cities do things that impact our ability. Cities have jurisdiction and agency over where and how much housing to build. That impacts the overall pressures on the county as an organization and as a geography as to where housing is available and affordable, and what kind of infrastructure is in place to support that housing, particularly in our smaller cities. So that's just another piece of that interplay
Yeah.
around housing.
Expenses, zoning, actual geographic availability of land, ability to bring in utility services. It's a very complex and it's never just about
And then the connectivity of the transportation system, which we won't get into.
bringing our friends in the streets.
But there's
Yes.
that too, given
Yeah.
that counties have more road miles than any other jurisdiction.
Yep.
But not more funding than any other jurisdiction to maintain them.
Yeah. Okay. Highest and best use in a complex county system, awareness of duplication and partnerships are critical. Housing, the gap between housing and income, so looking at how those kind of really impact each other and the connectivity of those. A couple of comments about making sure that also a threat, adoption of new technologies. I think we talked a lot about that, and it's not, it's both sides of the coin. And then we have a lone red, increasing focus on public health, potentially leading to support for health programs and services. Let's talk more about that in the last couple of minutes. Yes.
I put the red, and it's just because we're seeing massive disinvestment in public health right now. So we did have a lot of attention on public health in the COVID-19 crisis, and now when you look at the governor's budget and the OHA's budget, public health modernization basically isn't there. So we're facing significant headwinds in maintaining what we had built in public health. So I'm just not seeing the prioritization, and federally as well. We have the same concerns about disinvestment.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, to keep us on track, any final comments we want to make sure we talk about for opportunities and threats before we shift over to goals?
Were you going to say what I was going to say?
I don't know. Why don't you say it?
We were just having a little tiny sidebar that I think it's not called out, but maybe connected, and that's our advisory boards and committees. As we look at community engagement, as we look at kind of bringing information to the board in different ways, we have some opportunity to really look at the role and how we're using those and some efficiency pieces too. We're going to be doing some of that in H&HS, and I don't know if it belongs up there, but just wanted to call that out and let you add any pieces you want to add to that.
It's not what I was going to say, but thank you for bringing it up. Put a sticky note up there because we kind of dance around it, and everything up there is accurate, but it's not the full picture as far as the impacts of the current federal administration. This is really this is not just about policy debates. It is some, but that is not the full picture of what is happening. And it relates directly to the thing about people's lack of trust in government. We had 200 people show up yesterday at our public meeting to give comment because of the threats to basic human rights and safety that people are experiencing under this federal administration. This is bigger than we have some policy debates or some ideological, some minor differences about the best way to deliver government service. And I would argue that a turnout like that indicates not that people, yes, there are people losing trust in government, but that is also people who trust their government to protect them and support them and help them, and they came to say that they are expecting us to do that. So there's two sides to every coin, but I just think contextually, if we kind of sugarcoat and just talk about there's some policy differences with different administrations. Yes, there are, and currently it is well beyond and much broader and further reaching and more of a sort of existential threat, I believe, than just a simple pendulum swing of different policy platforms.
Great, thank you.
But a counter to
An
that.
additional perspective.
Well, in fact, and I agree with everything that Commissioner Krieger just said, but there was testimony there yesterday from a small number of people who said we're doing enough on some of the things that we're receiving testimony. So part of what we have is this political issue that is right there. And we put a green thing on it, meaning yes, the political diversity that exists in our 380,000 population county, and we serve everybody. So how do we as a county serve everybody as even-handedly as we can without blaming, pointing, or suggesting that somebody else did this, not me?
Yeah, finding that middle ground.
Yeah, and I think, we've been talking quite a bit about, there's the political aspect to that, but then there's also just the reality of you have a really large county with communities that have very diverse needs within that county, right? That there's no monolith of who you are serving as well. And so I think that both of those things really come to the forefront when we're thinking about how do we prioritize the resources that we have when we know that we have really diverse needs and really diverse opinions on how the county should be spending those resources and showing up.
I think there's a significant weakness that's not listed, and for me that is sharing our story with the public, like what the county does, because it is one of the most frequent questions that we get is what does the county do? People really, it's an invisible level of government for a large part. And we do have internal communication in that, but we have external communication weakness. And again, it always takes resources to do that, but without being able to share what we do, why we do it with the public, it will continue to show up as a threat of distrust to government. And I was surprised that that didn't show up in weaknesses.
Yeah, well, and I think part of that's because who we were getting feedback from are people who know exactly what the county does or who are engaged already, right? Just in terms of the actual population that probably showed up to provide response. But I think that thing, like that's true of every county we work with, is that people generally don't understand what a county does. And we generally don't need people to understand what a county does, but we do when we're asking them for funding or for some of these other pieces. Last comment here. Yeah.
And I agree entirely with what Commissioner Buck said, but I have my eyes open to another way of thinking about exactly what you said when I had lunch with someone who's now a new Multnomah County Commissioner. And she gave me a different perspective because I've been a county lawyer for 32 years, so I see it from a county perspective. But she said, Rob, you know, my friends, when they don't know what a county does, they tell me it's generally a sign that the county's doing a good job. But all of my friends are telling me that the county is a disaster. And now they know what the county is supposed to have been doing, but hasn't been doing, which caused her to run for Multnomah County Commission, and now she's a commissioner. So, you know, it's one of those things where I agree with exactly what you said. We need the citizens to know what we do so they support our continuing activities. But it seems like when things aren't working is when they really know what we do. So I think we need to look at both sides of that coin as well.
Well, thank you. I know that we could keep talking about all of these pieces, but we really appreciate the input. I do want to keep us rolling onto goals, which is our last major piece to get us through before we hit our noon number here. So, as a reminder, we have vision, mission, values up here, but this is all of your foundational statements, and then we have the strategic goals. Under each of those strategic goals, we will have more objectives, we will have more specific action items, but the goals are really those broad strokes. Where are we trying to get to as a county? What are going to be our top priorities moving forward? So I wanted to share 2 additional pieces of survey response, and we asked different questions of your internal staff versus the community. The first piece that I have up here is staff priorities, and we asked people to rank, and so these were the top 10 priorities that were ranked by staff when they had to select, I believe, 5. And what's interesting about this is we have housing and homelessness at the top, and the financial stability of the county. Both of those categories, over 50% of the survey takers ranked those as one of their top priorities. We have 2 that are really coming up quite high for staff. Then we have a bunch kind of in that 30% range. We have county infrastructure, public safety, and that's primarily around public safety funding and resourcing, employee engagement, community health, and community emergency preparedness. And then we have a couple at the bottom around operational efficiency, economic development, and serving under-resourced populations that are coming in more on that 20% mark. One thing that you're not seeing here, but came back very strongly in the open-ended survey responses, was also around how are we bringing equity and inclusion into our services. That's kind of hit on under serving under-resourced populations, but there are quite a few comments that were coming back from staff in that area as well. And then the other piece that I wanted to show you was we asked the community, what do you want to see more of versus what do you want to see less of? And you will see there's quite a lot of overlap thematically with the staff responses too. I've highlighted and bolded the ones that have direct overlap here. But again, on this one, affordable housing options, homelessness and poverty and limited affordable housing, those are all coming up really high on this list. Accessible healthcare services, limited access to healthcare services, and community health and well-being are also really high on this list, as well as public safety, crime and safety concerns. But we still have things like economic development, transportation infrastructure, emergency preparedness, neglect and disrepair of public spaces and roads, so that infrastructure piece, those are all coming up. Some of the things that are unique to this list that we did not see on the staff list were some more of the environmental sustainability initiatives were coming up higher on the community survey, and then also childcare assistance programs, discrimination and social inequities, and limited cultural diversity. So the biggest takeaway that I want to say to share between these two is that housing, public safety, community health are really coming up front and center for both the folks who are taking it from the employee perspective and from the community perspective as well. So with that, between these survey results, the SWOT analysis, what we have done is we've put up the 4 goal areas from your previous strategic plan. And you guessed it, we're gonna ask you to get into theirs and provide some feedback on these things. So we have them listed up here, and again, we're gonna do red, yellow, green. Red is, we don't think this goal applies anymore. We want this one to be out of the strategic plan entirely. Yellow is, we like this goal, but we think it needs some adjustments. Green is, yes, let's keep it for the new plan. We also have an other goals area over here. So if you have ideas that are not captured in these goals, remembering that under each of these goals, we'll still have plenty of other details. We'll have all the specific objectives and the action items and those things. But if there's a broad concept that is missing, that's where we would like you to add that to the other goals. Any questions about that activity? Okay, we're gonna give you 10 minutes to do this, so please find a new partner and do this initial review.
Remember again, mics are live.
Yes, sir.
You have a partner.
Gotta remember my post.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's tight around here.
Do you have anyone?
Yeah. Go for it. Yeah.
You're allowed to do 3 pairs of 3.
Pairs of 3s.
Yeah.
I don't have to give up. I don't have to partner up. When we were in COVID, you know, training up for emergency management, these align they're in priority, so you always have to take people being your response. Next is
Who is our audience?
So Rob, what you can provide.
Make it up where it
Because there are some certain connections.
Last time I signed it.
This one kind of like the infrastructure.
I've been in this.
Yeah, well, this is from my viewpoint, helping with services. That's one of the services, that's one of the services. So I serve in that role, I serve in that would be how I would separate that.
Just like, and I so like my animal brain and it's not.
I think I'm just limited in how they can actually affect the affordable housing. City codes. Obviously outside of the urban boundaries, we will have.
It's just that's a my in those reservations.
Yeah, I would say repetitive.
I know, but I don't, yeah. I was just looking at a document this morning and whatever it was.
I'll let you know.
More active.
That's okay.
Sorry. More action.
We can green.
I mean, yeah, we can.
I know, I almost just.
I think both of them probably.
So this is truly.
Although
You're a lot. I'm going this way. I'm not swimming up that stream.
This is yellow.
Well, this goes say false.
well, no, this one. Can I get the pictures? Well, or houselessness.
Yeah, I mean like after, like somebody.
I'm not sure if it's thicker, but it'll show.
Okay, sure.
What do you feel?
That is something, Eve, that we should
They made it here, so they'll make it.
Oh, I was just curious. Instead of like shaking the heart.
Right, yeah.
Okay. All right, I don't have a whole lot else.
Yeah, no, I think we're good.
All right, what are we missing? We gotta go to other goal ideas.
Oh, that's right.
What's missing? How are you? I would say what's missing.
So this is left over. This is what we're into that are people who dropped out of partnerships or not collapsing. It evolved into that as we recognize it. But I think in doing so, to your point, we partnership.
So this is the yellow, like, yes.
Lots of small structures. It's like trying to incorporate.
What we were talking about.
There we go.
Training everyone.
All right, let's roll.
Did you finish?
Absolutely.
Well done. Well done.
High level of efficiency around here.
Right.
Start doing that. Yeah.
That's
yours.
Starting today.
Starting today, you're the.
I would have liked those.
Yeah, when you feel something is emotional, I mean,
I don't know. Yes, there's it's the elephant in the room. Isn't it? I mean, it's because that's what we don't talk about. Even where the money's coming from. Right. So there's nothing really that gets to.
Get out and enjoy the sunshine.
thank you. Thank you. True service.
Take one more minute here. Any last ideas?
Yeah.
Just start there and read down.
Me and Trump have
You bringing us back together, 80 Rose?
Have a little go.
Okay.
You're having to, yeah, you're having to.
Again.
I'm gonna have to put it on a different, my other hand, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Last comments of here. Thank you for doing that process.
Mind the SWAT?
Yes, I think you're getting very excellent at pairing up, using those sticky dots. Thank you all. Okay, so we're gonna go through these, see what came up for people in organizational health. For the most part, we've got a bunch of green sticky dots over here, which is great to see. We have one yellow dot up here, and we have a comment about recognizing the importance of existing services and work as we form the plan for change. Keep the list smaller on the plan. So I think that's about prioritizing in that space. Anything that anyone wants to add about our people in organizational health? It seems like in general feeling pretty good. But anyone want to speak to either the sticky note or the yellow dot?
I can speak to the sticky note. I don't think we were the yellow dot, but there was I'd heard conversation about our current plan is just very large.
Yes.
Right? And there was a conversation about items go on there because if you're not on the plan, you're not important, right? And so how do you, as you craft a plan and a vision for the future and change, be inclusive and recognize those things that you've already built and exist. And so that's what I meant by keeping the list slot. But like if you could call that out and say, the stuff you do now today is, important, then you won't have to have all of that huge list of, oh, we got to improve this piece and that piece and this piece.
Yeah, I so appreciate you saying that because sometimes the impulse is to say we want to capture all the work that we do as a county in the plan when you do a huge amount of day-to-day work. And it's a balance because we don't want to not capture that and make it appear that we're not doing that work, but also it loses the strategic part of the strategic plan if we're just reciting a long list of what we've already agreed to do, right? Yes. We need to have a balance there. And so that will be something that we will be coming back to you all through this process to say how well are we striking this balance, because we know that we don't want it to be, that was certainly feedback that we got pretty consistently both in the survey and in interviews of saying we want the plan to feel more realistic and more manageable rather than kind of this super long laundry list. Appreciate that, yeah.
I'll just say, and I'm not responsible for the yellow dot, I'm a green dot.
And no one's gonna take ownership of that.
I just really like that we continue, particularly as we go into scarcity budgets, which is almost always what we have, that keeping the investing in employees is important. So I've grown up in the sheriff's office where we've known for as long as I've been a part of it, we can't do all the things we think we ought to do.
Yeah.
So the things we're going to do well. And we talked about the strengths being the people in the organization are recognized outside. And so we've got to make sure that we continue to hire and employ fantastic people, which we currently do. And I see other organizations who also can't afford what they want, and they end up not being able to employ the terrific people because they're not investing or focusing in the resource in that direction. So I just like that we highlight that we want to continue to employ great people, and we recognize without finding new resources, that means there might be less people. But we're going to employ great people, and we're going to focus on doing what we can do the best we can, and recognizing that sometimes that means there are things we can't do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Sheriff. And clearly, though, to your point, again, there's just another opportunity to not get stuck in thinking resource always means money, because the cultural pieces is what the culture of the workplace that has been created here is what the strengths indicated, and why people want to come or stay, and that's not always a money thing.
Yeah, and your staff, this is true of every single.
But we need more money. Sorry,
Yeah.
you're on the camera. The mics are live. Just say.
Your staff are always going to be your most critical resource, because they are going to be at the heart of whether or not you can deliver services well and effectively to your community, right? Like that is the connection point there. So I think that it's very important to remember that resources is what enables, like financial resources enables you to get and retain highly skilled workforce that is an efficiency in and of itself. Because if you have really great people doing this work, they will be able to do it faster, easier, better as well, and deliver to your community. So I think that's a great point. Thank you. All right, let's move over to robust infrastructure. We have a lot of yellows on this one. There's some comments here about whether or not this language is as clear as it needs to be. It feels like maybe it's a little too high level. Are we talking about internal or external infrastructure? Can we clarify some of these broad terms? So can anyone speak to that topic in terms of like what additional clarity do we want to see as part of this goal?
We spoke, Eve and I were talking about it, and I kind of expressed like I think there's, it can be interpreted in at least two ways, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It actually may be tactically like intentional. This to me is all, the primary audience is our public, the people we serve, and so robust infrastructure is, safety in our community and all of the things it says there. But I have a good portion of my team that would read that, and then they would think of the deferred maintenance, right? And it's about our facilities and our buildings and the quality and longevity of those structures. And so on one hand, it creates a little bit of like duality, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? So maybe it is okay that it means two different things depending upon the audience. So it was just, I noted it as yellow and had talked about it with you.
Yeah, I think I was also thinking, we need a certain level of specificity because infrastructure is super expensive, and what you can accomplish in 3 years for the life of this plan, there's only a certain amount because often we need state or federal help in order to accomplish our goals. And so we have to be very choosy about what it is we want to emphasize if we're going to go after many millions of dollars to help us achieve a goal. So I think I wanted to see more focus from the top down in this one.
Yeah, thank you.
I think there's a risk with all of these that if we don't do what you're saying, which is narrow them to be more specific and targeted, that they become sort of like our mission statement, like, oh, we got to include everything in here. But the point of these is to prioritize and say, okay, this is the time now to say, what do we really want to focus on? So there's a little bit of like, this is kind of all encompassing, it's like, oh, it's broadband, it's parks, it's economic investment, it's facilities, it's roads and bridges, it's like, it's all everything. I don't think that all of these goals should reflect, and this is my opinion, I don't think they should all reflect the entire organization.
Yeah.
They should reflect what does the board and leadership, and as a reflection of the community, feel like we need to focus on in the next 3 years. It's not a reflection of all the stuff that we do. There's a lot of stuff we're gonna do that's outside of these areas. This is the opportunity to say, what's most important that we need to accomplish in the next 3 years. So I think that's true for all of these. What's most important for people, what's most important for infrastructure, and down the line.
So just heightening the specificity.
Just one challenge on that, when we do get super focused on specific things in this 3-year time span, it becomes challenging when we bring things forward to the board that are more in line with generic things in our board packets, because we have to speak, that this item addresses board goals. Well, if it's not specifically in the plan, we struggle with how to justify that this is important.
And I think it's an interesting thing because it speaks to how useful will this plan be as a decision-making framework for the organization. Because ideally, this should be a decision-making framework where we're not, if we get to the end of this and literally anything you bring forward could fit under one of these goals, we've done our job poorly because it's much less useful for you all. And we still want to maintain some degree of flexibility because things change and shift as you go as well. So I do think that that's going to be a balance, but from my perspective, looking at these, I think that at least some sharpening could happen without loss of flexibility as well. Yeah.
Thanks. So I assume that's part of what, if I remember from looking at some of the sample plans, you create kind of a preamble to the plan for us that helps capture that fact of what you just spoke to and what Dan's just expressing, so we don't fall into that trap, that just sort of acknowledges this plan isn't the totality, and to what Steve said, of what this organization does, but this is our clarifying set of goals that we will always return back to, and that means they all need to have some kind of measurable aspect to them, which I think for our team, that was the greatest challenge with this, was like, how can we tell what kind of progress we're making toward the goals?
Yeah.
Based on how it's described. Not that we didn't think having goals around infrastructure is important.
Yeah, okay, that's really helpful.
Oh, and the last thing, sorry, I would say is important can mean you could decide to create goals around things you think you can actually make progress on, or you can make sort of the goals because you think those are the most important things, even if you don't see a path to making progress. Like, that's sort of a philosophical decision.
Yes, and I would say ideally we want you more toward that second piece of, we want to understand what the actual priorities are here, because that's part of what the board is setting for staff as well, of saying, okay, if this is what our priority is, what is it going to take to get us there? What will we have to change and shift to achieve these things? So yeah, I think that's totally fair. I know that we could continue on this. I think, was there a hand over here that I missed?
Well, I just really quick.
Yeah.
When I think of that one, I do think of the McKenzie fire. So to the extent these are goals for the county, but also, I don't know where they fit in, but guideposts to the community, because watching that fire unfold and all the infrastructure burn up, people couldn't return there safely without communication and other infrastructure returning, but that's not always built resiliently and out of control. So the county doesn't have control over the things, but guideposts to what's ideal for a community to be thriving and resilient is important.
Yeah. Well, and I think that also speaks to, like, can we use a more specific term than just infrastructure, something that the community would actually respond to and be able to identify, of saying, like, those are the literal physical spaces, for example, that enable me to be to live where I live and be part of where I am. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Okay, coming over to vibrant communities here. We again have quite a few yellows, and I think a lot of the comments are also about clarity. What do we mean by some of these words? This concept is wonderful, but can we better define what success looks like? And I will say, probably for all of these, one element to remember is that the goals will also have objectives underneath the goals that will help to bring some of that clarity as well. We want the goals to be able to stand alone, but they are part of a full plan too. So that is something to remember here. But anything that we want to talk about in terms of what would make this vibrant communities goal feel more clear? Any thoughts on that? Okay, so we know we don't like it, but we don't know what we don't like about it. Is that fair? Okay.
I mean, so many of the call-outs are so subjective in terms of how you define, equitable opportunities and economic vitality. And, to our earlier conversation, is affordable housing the right
right
language for this community and for where we are today. So I think it goes back to that, like setting the measurables, which means you do have to kind of hone in on the quantifiable aspects of those words that are going to mean something different to different people and where they are in their life at the moment.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So conceptually, it doesn't sound like anyone has big problems with these concepts as you might subjectively understand them today, but we might need to dig in a little bit more to make sure that everybody in this room is actually on the same page around what do we mean by economic vitality and how we're just defining that. Is that fair?
I think we probably need to get into a discussion of objectives in order to really understand the relative importance of these two goals. Because, you know, when I think of Health and Human Services, the direct services that we provide to constituents go on the Safe Healthy County side. The work that we do to promote access to healthy foods, or the work Dan does to create additional parks, or the work Steve's team does to build economic opportunity, that's going to go on the vibrant community side in my mind. It's like, where is the intervention applied? Is it at the direct service level or the community level? And based on the relative prioritization of the different possible objectives, we may need to shift these a little bit in terms of their weighting.
Yes, and I love that you bring that up because sometimes what we do is we'll put the objectives beneath these and then we'll go back to them at a later point in time and say, okay, now that we have more specifics around really what we're accomplishing, are those well reflected in the language that we have for the goal? So I think that that will certainly be part of that process. That's great.
Speaks more to systems.
Okay, in our last 5 minutes here, we have safe and healthy counties. We have some green dots here. We have one yellow dot. We have services focus. We want this to be here. Sustainable public safety funding. I know that came up certainly on some of the weaknesses, challenges part that we know we are struggling in that area. Reducing health disparities, adding physical in front of health. And that the last line might be redundant here. So anyone want to share anything on potential updates to this one? It sounds like conceptually we're still in the right spot, but we might need to make some language adjustments. Any other thoughts?
Emphasis on physical and houselessness.
Great, and I see the edit, houselessness rather than homelessness. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. All right, well then, we also have a couple other goal ideas. Partnerships, financial resources, and mind the SWOT, which I'm assuming means like, can we go back into the SWOT and pull out other pieces that might show up here? And a lot of times what we do is we use the SWOT a lot for some of the objectives that we pull through as well. But I'm really curious about partnerships because that is something that was kind of absent from the previous strategic plan. So does anyone want to speak to that one?
Sure. I think we cannot make the big changes that we need to make in our community to make our community better as the government alone. We have to pull in private enterprise, we have to pull in nonprofits, and we have to figure out how to partner in better and more strategic ways, which we are already demonstrating the ability to do, and it's just focused on how do we build that over the next 3 years even more to weather the storm that we may be facing with changing priorities, changing resources, and still serve our community. So I think we've got to dig deeper in this space in order to manage the changes that are ahead.
Thank you. And then the other one on here, financial resources. I did want to bring this up because sometimes financial resources gets kind of folded in under people and organizational health because you need financial resources in order to have a healthy organization. But I'm curious on thoughts about, given where the county's funding situation is, do we need a full separate goal area that really speaks to financial resilience? Yeah.
It's related, but not only to that, and kind of partnerships. What's also absent, maybe it's more a strategy, but is talking about the policy landscape and the opportunities, particularly with partnerships with our state and federal delegation. I mean, a lot of the weaknesses and challenges are directly tied to unfunded mandates, regulatory and legislative restrictions or challenges, and straight up just funding channels. And so I don't know I don't know that that's its own goal area, but I want to call it out to be sure it's within all of the goals, that's a pathway to helping achieve the goals is through policy advocacy and legislative action with other jurisdictions.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see especially the partnerships and all of these external relationships is really thinking about that full landscape and weaving those in probably across all 4 of these goal areas, if not additional goal areas. Yeah.
Lana and I put up financial resources, and we were thinking more about like how do we pay for the things that we do have a base level funding problem. It strikes me that the first 2 partnerships and financial resources also align with 2 of our strategic lenses.
Yeah,
of financial stewardship or stewardship of resources and collective impact or partnership. So it may be that whether or not they're separate objectives or they're part of the lenses that are more closely aligned with the way in which we go about doing this work.
Great. So what I'm taking away from this is these still feel like generally the right goal areas. We need to make some language clarifications within these. And we need to make sure that we are capturing partnerships and financial stability potentially as another goal or alternatively as objectives within that. Does that seem like a fair general assumption? Thumbs up if that seems fair?
And more focused. The only thing I didn't hear you say is that these still are sort of a little bit all-encompassing, and we need to be more targeted.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, on that note, I'm so sorry. We are right at time here. So I want to make sure that we get you out of here because I know you have a next meeting. Thank you so much for doing this work. This is really fantastic. And what I will do here is just let you know we are going to be prepping with you all between now and the next work session, which is about a month out. So you'll be hearing from us in the meantime with some drafts, some things to review. But we are really looking forward to getting you all back together. And we thank you so much for your time today. This is really fantastic.
Thank you.
Annie, Rose, and Jesse, thank you so much. Bless you guys for all the great information and hard work, and your team behind you. Thank you for their work as well. And thank you for getting us the next step forward. So we appreciate that, and we look forward to the next step. So before they scoot out of the room, is there any final comments or something you might want to make before they scoot out of the room before we move on? If not, that concludes our regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners for Wednesday, February 25th. We do have need for executive session. I'm going to go read us in. We will meet in executive session 5 minutes after the gavel. The Board of County Commissioners will now meet in one executive session. The session is to conduct deliberations with persons designed by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602E, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff will be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are precluded from attending. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. Members of the news media are not allowed to tape, video, record, or otherwise record an executive session. Verbatim notes are prohibited. No decision may be made after the executive session. We will not return to public session after this executive session. Our next public meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 11th, 9 a.m. at Harris Hall. This regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners is adjourned.